Okay, welcome everybody. According to my time, it says 8:30. So, and this is our TetraCon. This is our third annual virtual TetraCon, and it really is Tetra across the country. So I want to welcome everybody, and this is why for some we're starting early morning. I've already told our comms person this won't be a regular thing, but we want everybody to take part because all of Canada and across country participation makes Tetra, and we really want to celebrate that, and especially in our 35th year. So it means a lot to all of us that you're attending. For those who don't know, my name is Eric Molendyke. I'm the program manager of Tetra, and I want to thank Josh, who is admitting people into to join us today. And again, you're welcome to drop in as you wish. Again, we're starting here at 8:30, and the general public part is going till 11:45 Pacific time. Don't make me do math, just kind of work that out in your own time zone. And as we get started, I just want to thank some of our sponsors. You're going to hear more about this throughout the day, but of course, Tetra is the national program that's part of the Disability Foundation. So I want to thank the Disability Foundation for being a part of this as well. We've also gotten funding from the Government of Canada, and we've also gotten funding from the province. Along with that, we have the Allard Foundation, we have the Layat Foundation, we have TELUS, and we have Minto. So I want to thank all of our sponsors that helped us put on this virtual national conference. And then, of course, if you'll please allow me, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. Because when we're meeting today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land in which we call home, wherever that may be. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, whose traditional territory, the Disability Foundation and its affiliated societies offices are located on. We do this land acknowledgement to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations, and as we improve our understanding of local Indigenous people. Please join me in a moment of reflection. Thank you. I do just want to do some other housekeeping. So as you can see, we do have a live transcript on kind of closed captioning. I'm aware it's not perfect, so I'm going to try and speak as clear as possible to help the transcript catch up. And I should also mention that we are recording because we will play this on our YouTube channel. I know some people may not be able to join us live, but we want people to be able to watch it after. We will have question periods throughout the day. Again, Josh is putting notes in the chat. We'll try to get to questions. And if you're not speaking, please, if you wouldn't mind being on mute. So just those housekeeping things. A bit of a sad note, but definitely somebody we want to remember, longtime Tetra board member Bryce Clark. For those who are in the prairies and especially Edmonton, Bryce's impact is well known and what he meant to the community. He passed away unexpectedly earlier this year, but his contribution to the disabled community and to Tetra will never be forgotten. And for those who don't know, he was a full-time police officer of the Edmonton Police Force, and the only one to do so with his level of spinal cord injury. So truly an inspiration to us all. I now would like to introduce our Executive Director, David Fong. You may be meeting him for the first time. I first met David when he joined the Disability Foundation in 2017. He was brought on to be the Director of Operations. And immediately the foundation benefited from David's background in technology. He has a background in information technology with a bachelor technology degree from BCIT, which has a management focus. And then when he was working at the foundation, he went on to get a Master of Science in Nonprofit Administration from Louisiana State University. So talking about a man who likes to keep himself busy. David has a number of accreditations. I'm not technical, but for those who are, he has TOGAF, Six Sigma, and he has TIL. Before working with the foundation, he implemented high-level systems for WorkSafe BC. That's where he was for many years. And he focused on project management and team development. And we are really happy to have him as our executive director. Please help me in welcoming David Fogg. David?
Oh, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon as well. Thanks, Eric. I don't know who you were describing, but I'll take that. So yes, welcome. I can't believe it's been a year since the last one. Man, where does the time fly? But I am very happy to give you, I'm only going to be chatting for 5 minutes, so I don't want to upset Eric's agenda. I do want to let people know who don't know how the organizations work. The Disability Foundation oversees 6 other independent nonprofit societies. And we do this for a very good reason. It allows the individual societies like Tetra Society to focus on their mandate, right? So they don't have to worry, the organization itself, the society itself doesn't have to worry about things like governance administration or strategic planning or finance, communications, IT, HR. So those types of things the Disability Foundation takes care of for Tetra Society. Next, Eric. So this year, it's a very exciting year for all of us. This is the last year of the 5-year strategic plan that we started in 2017. There's a brand new one in 2023, and we are right now in the midst of it. We're only at the first draft. So I'm just gonna give you some quick notes about what that may look like. But our vision and mission remains very much the same or similar. We want to inspire and empower people with disabilities to imagine what is possible. And through our societies, we want them to pursue their individual and unique journeys. Who we serve will change a bit. Our primary participants for the last 35 years in Tetra have been people with physical disability of all ages, but we do want to broaden our definition of that to include all disabilities. And we will do that over the next 5 years. Eric? Next, Eric. Thanks. Again, I don't want to take up too much time, but it's important that we recognize that the next 5 years, we have 5 priority goals, which are funding. We want to focus on funding, partnerships, the internal capacity, volunteering, and of course, the programs and services themselves. For funding, we want to focus on a long-term fundraising strategy, put in a solid investment plan, and consider social ventures to help fund the programs and services. With partnerships, we want to create more formal and informal corporate partnerships and academic partnerships. You know, Tetra, we love our universities and colleges across the country. We do so much with them. We're very proud of that. We also want to enhance our brand throughout the country. Regarding internal capacity, we want to make sure that we provide a competitive wage and benefits. You know, as you've been hearing what's going on these days, it's very difficult to keep up and catch up and all of that. So we want to make sure that we're well positioned for our internal group, our internal staff, to be able to continue working with Tetra Society. And that includes growth and enhancement, more education for our staff, more growth, more promotions from within. And I'm very proud to say that we have today we have a very diverse and inclusive group. I believe close to 50% of our staff are people with disabilities. And that will continue on for the next 5 years, at least. Also, with our priorities, we want to focus on volunteering. We want, again, include a diverse group of volunteers. We want to seek out specific skills, and we want to keep our volunteers for as long as possible. So we want to provide education and whatever else that our volunteers may want out of volunteering with us. And last but not least, programs and services. We want to be able to impact and empower more people, their families and community. So we want to, as Eric knows, we want to cover as much of the country as possible, either virtually or in person. But some other exciting things that we are wanting to do over the next few years includes implementing shared machinery workspaces and pilot larger projects, such as adaptive play spaces for children, which we piloted this year as well. So these are very exciting things that I think is going to really set Tetra apart over the next 5 years. And as I mentioned earlier, we're in the draft phase. We're in the draft phase of our strategic plan. So changes are expected, but with these 5 goals, I'm sure those are well set. Eric? Just wanted to mention that our board of directors, I want to recognize Bryce. Thank you, Eric, for that. We will miss him a great deal. Ryan Clarkson has stepped down this year, but temporarily. And also Jacques Courteau has also stepped down. He has moved on to the Disability Foundation board. So he will be a great advocate for Tetra on that board. Our new board includes Michelle. Well, Michelle and Ho Ting has been there for years. Michelle Amory, she's been with Tetra since 2003. She's a tireless advocate for equality and disability pride. She's a fabulous collaborator, bringing organizations and individuals together. And Michelle continues to sit on our board. Ho Ting is a graduate from Royal Roads University. His background is banking and investments. So his experience will be very useful as we move forward. He also has strategic leadership expertise. So we will be counting on him to help us along with our strategic plan. I'm also very happy to announce 3 new board of directors, 3 new directors, including Ian Price. Ian is the founder of ICANN Resource Group here in Kelowna. He has a volunteer and an advocate for independence through technology. He has his work includes working with Technology for Living, Able Sail, he's a sailor, Neil Squire, muscular dystrophy, Rick Hansen, and of course, Tetra. We know Ian for years. Dr. Leonard Lai, I'm sure many of you will know Dr. Leonard Lai. He is a professor emeritus at Memorial University in Newfoundland. He has since retired, but he was a professor of civil engineering and a former associate dean. He has many, many, many accolades over the last 25 years that he has overseen Tetra projects in Newfoundland. And our favorite award that he has is Tetra Society's Lifetime Achievement Award. So we're very, very fortunate to have Leonard join our board. And last but not least is Keith McDonald. Keith, you may know Keith. He was a director on the Tetra board in Halifax. I have a special kinship with Keith because we have very similar backgrounds. We're both retired from the public administration. We're both IT people. We were both IT project managers. He has been with Tetra since '95, so we're very happy to have Keith on board as well. Anyways, I think I've taken more than my 5 minutes, Eric. Sorry about that. But with that, thank you all very much. I hope you have an amazing TetraCon 2022. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you very much, David, for that overview and taking time to speak with us. So I am going to go right back into resharing, and we'll move to the next segment. Okay. So why we're here is to bring together Tetra as an entire nation. And one of the great ways that we've tried to do that is our annual Tetra Nation campaign. And it really celebrates projects that have been done across the country. Again, our head office is in Vancouver, but great work is being done across the country. So without further ado, I'd like to celebrate projects that have been done across the country. I'd like to introduce our national coordinator, Sylvia Balico, and Sylvia is going to talk about some of our award-winning projects, along with Crystal Liechko-Johnson, another regional coordinator that won Tetra Nation this year. Sylvia?
Thank you, Eric. Hello, everyone. We're going to move from the Atlantic region right across the country to the West Coast. So we're going to start in the Atlantic region. We, the Tetra Society, have 3 chapters there, one in Fredericton, New Brunswick, one in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and of course, St. John's, Newfoundland. And this chapter is also headed up by Dr. Leonard Lai, who is with us today. The winning project, as you can see, is the guitar strummer. This client had a stroke and he's completely paralyzed on his right side, but he can use his left hand and left leg. So his hand on the left side holds the guitar and hits the chords, and his left foot then uses the device to strum the guitar. Now, they've made 3 other guitar strummers in this chapter, so they're very good at it. And I just wanted to say, I think this is the first time the client used the guitar, so let's play it.
I thought that might happen. Just 1 second. I have to turn on the sound. Let's see. I hope the sound comes through. I've shared sound. So let's see. Let me know if you can hear it. Okay. I'm just going to go back a little bit. There we go. Okay, so let me just have to exit out so I can reshare. There we go. So hopefully the sound's on. Give me a thumbs up if you are able to hear it.
The client is in his mid-40s. He had a stroke and his right side is paralyzed. He was an avid guitar player but can't strum with his right hand after the stroke. His therapist saw the NTV news story about a similar project Tetra did and thought it was suitable for the client. Since we already had the design, it was a matter of adjusting the design for his needs. When the completed project was delivered, both him and his wife were in tears. They never thought they would hear him playing guitar again.
So congratulations to the St. John's chapter for winning this year's Tetra Nation in the Atlantic region. So we'll move on now to Ontario, to the central region. In Ontario, we have 10 chapters, all the way from Windsor through to Ottawa, with a new virtual chapter up in Thunder Bay with a couple of volunteers up there. And in Ontario, the Guelph chapter won for the Argo ATV project. I have to say, when the request for assistance came in for that project, I really didn't think we would be able to complete the project because it was quite extensive. The client didn't live near anybody or any of our volunteers or close to our chapters, but luckily he had many of the parts, and our volunteers went out to his home to look at the project, and they decided to take it on. It's a great team in Guelph. They have a fabulous workshop. Earl Bauman, Glenn McKee, and Bruce Weber worked on this. And it's amazing what they did. They made an automatic ramp for the client on his vehicle. He also has a locking system on the floor of the vehicle so that he's safe while in it. They raised all the controls to his level with toggle switches. They installed 2 hand controls, one for gas and brake, and then one for steering. And then the final thing they had to do was raise the entire cage up so that it would fit the wheelchair and the client in it. And you can tell by the client's face in this video that he is absolutely ecstatic about this project. Go ahead and play.
Volunteers in Guelph seriously modified an ATV by automating the wheelchair ramp, modifying the controls, installing a wheelchair locking system, modifying the steering, modifying the gas and brakes, making the roll cage taller. Now we are moving forward to a better future.
So congratulations to Guelph. It was an amazing project done in record time. And like I said, the clients are really happy. So now we'll head further west to the winners in the prairies, and I'll turn it over to Crystal.
Thanks, Sylvia. I'm happy to introduce this year's winning Tetra Nation project from the prairies. So the Prairie region has chapters in Lethbridge, Edmonton, Red Deer, Regina, Saskatoon, and Winnipeg. And as I mentioned, this year's winner is from Lethbridge. We actually recently just had a new chapter coordinator start in Lethbridge, Daniela Aguilar. The volunteer on this winning project is actually the previous chapter coordinator, Rachel Shipley, who has stayed on as a technical volunteer. So we're happy to still have her on board. And for this project, the client had been unable to access and enjoy unlimited joint movement in the water. She'd outgrown the size and weight options for flotation devices, and she wasn't able to use a traditional life jacket. So the Lethbridge volunteer had to think out of the box to find a viable solution. And she took a Swimways spring float sun seat and a swimming suit and combined the two, as you'll see in the video. This was done to allow stretch and comfort for the client's needs and to give her buoyancy in the water. So since having the item completed, the client's mom has reported that while she was a little nervous at first, it didn't take her long to get back into the water. So now let's take a look at the video.
The client loves to swim. However, she has a tracheostomy. The client just underwent scoliosis surgery, and water therapy will help recovery greatly. So the urgency to get her back into a swim solution was a priority. The volunteer purchased a swimwear sun seat and a swimming suit. A hole was cut in the sun seat, and the swimsuit was cut in half to attach to the sun seat. It also has a backrest so that she can have support if she rested her head while swimming.
And congratulations again to the Lethbridge chapter. Now we'll move further west.
Thank you, Crystal. And that would be me. And I'm just going to let this video play because really it speaks for itself. So without further ado, this was the project that won in the Pacific region of Tetra Nation.
Well, you can see here that we have the crib, and thanks to the Tetra Society, this is actually at lap height for me. So I'm able to easily open up these bifold doors that they designed for us, and take a look at Stella. See how nice she is, how nice and smiley she is.
There's that smile. I love that you can pull right underneath it.
Yeah, why don't you come a little bit closer just to see exactly what the height looks like. So you can see that my knees, they're not bashing into it. It's actually right at the height of my wheelchair. They asked me in advance what the height would be ideally for myself. And you can see that in the mornings, I can come here, I can play with her. She can look Dad right in the eyes and smile when we're playing.
So as I mentioned, certainly a project that speaks for itself, and you can never go wrong when you have an adorable baby in a video. So on behalf of all of us, congratulations to all Tetra Nation winners and participants. And we are almost right at 9 o'clock. So I think what we'll do, because we're actually going to hear more about this project from from the fellow who provided the video, Marco, and kind of talk about how you could have devices like what you see here. So we will do the door prize a little bit later. And Marco, are you online with us?
I am online with you, yes. And
okay. Well, I know you well enough to know that you are a busy guy, so I want to keep you on time here. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today and being generous enough to provide your video. And we kind of saw the outcome of your project, but kind of talk about, and I see David Spears has joined us as well. So people get to see the outcome of the project in the video. But what I really wanted to talk to both of you about is kind of the process of how you get there. So Marco, I'll start with you. You and your wife are first-time parents, and you realize what?
Well, we realized that I want to be an active participant in being a parent. And, one of the ways that we can do that, in fact, actually, we stumbled across a video that Tetra had done a couple of years ago, I believe, servicing another client in the Vancouver region for an accessible crib. Now, the dimensions and specs, I wasn't 100% clear on based on the video, but I liked the general idea. But I thought to myself, well, I wonder if I could approach Tetra Society to support us in this way so that there was a crib that would work for my abilities. I have cerebral palsy, I have spastic triplegia, so it affects my two legs and my right arm. So dexterity has been a bit of an issue in my right arm. It's my non-dominant hand and arm. And I knew that I was going to need a design to make it really functional for me. And so with that, I actually want to pass it now over to David, because I think that David could do a really great job as the volunteer on the project to discuss kind of the back and forth that he and I had to ensure that the crib was not only going to meet my needs, but was going to really be safe for my daughter. So we'll go with that first, and I'll let David explain, and then I can talk a little bit more about my process.
Sounds great. I just did want to welcome you, David, more formally, because any clients in the Lower Mainland have definitely benefited from your skills and your fellow volunteers. So thank you for taking time. And as Marco said, how did you come up with these design concepts?
Well, there's been a few cribs done by our chapter, and there's two obvious shortcomings of a conventional crib is reaching over the railing, and as Marco pointed out, rolling under it. So I proposed three options to Marco and Karen with the typical projects that we've done have had either two gates where the side rail is cut in half and swings open from the ends, or a single gate in the middle with the sides being framed in a little bit to hold the gate. And then the third one, which I haven't seen done before, was offering bifold doors, as you saw Marco open. And in our thought, of the three choices, they preferred the bifold doors for a couple of reasons. They're simple and they lock. And by bifolds, you're able to open one half or the other half while being close to the crib. With the two gates, you have to pull the gate open and then wheel towards the crib in the interim if the child's against the rail or close to falling out. There's a bit of a safety thing there. So in the end, we came up with the design you see. And then when we finally brought the crib into the bedroom, Marco rolled up to it, and we discovered that there was room to adjust the height of it for his specific wheelchair. So we did a little modification on site.
So that may be a question that some people are asking. Marco, now you're well connected in the disability community, but definitely they say there's no handbook with being a parent. So when you put in this request, did you have any fear that the crib, that maybe it couldn't be modified or that it might not work out? Kind of talk about the back and forth aspect, even though David's doing the technical part, talk about the input that you as a client get to have.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Eric. And I got to say, like, I think the biggest fear that I had was not anything to do with the project at all, because I believe in the Tetra Society and everything that you guys do. So that was not a fear of mine. It was more, am I going to be able to handle this in terms of pulling my daughter practically in and out of the crib? I had no idea. And in fact, I remember coming on a call with you prior to kicking the project off, and you said, Marco, I know that you're a guy that works out at the gym, but you know, lifting a child is a totally different thing. So you might have to adjust your workouts to, you know, imagine yourself pulling your daughter in and out of the crib, get yourself prepared, especially from that height. But to David's point, the a la carte service that I received was, I honestly, like, David, you're an absolute professional. And not only that, but you stuck with us the entire day until the crib was adjusted in such a way that it was exactly what we needed, up to the point where when David originally assembled everything, as he mentioned, we realized we still had some wiggle room, and that the crib was a little bit high in terms of me reaching over and out. If we could lower it by about an inch or two, it would actually be almost at chest height to where I could just slide my daughter in and out. And he was like, that's no big deal. That's just cutting the wood. And he had his electric saw there with him, and it was noisy for sure, but we were able to get it done. And not only that, but the process of emailing and phone calling back and forth with David, he did the lion's share of the work. I mean, he identified a crib online for us through Facebook Marketplace so that it would potentially lower the cost of contribution that I could make back to the project, that kind of thing. Because, you know, obviously there is an opportunity for you to contribute to the volunteers and to the projects overall, which is fantastic. But the fact that David was able to find a crib that was going to functionally work with slight modifications, and he kept sending photos back and forth. What about this one? What about that one? We found one that we liked. And then I remember after he went ahead and picked up the crib from somebody off of Facebook Marketplace and brought it back, I thought to myself, oh, I think that crib's a bit gray. And actually the walls in the nursery were gray, and I didn't want to have the crib washed out. So I felt terrible. But I emailed David. I said, David, would it be possible for you to just spray the entire crib white? I know you could have probably found a white crib, but I'm realizing now that I don't want it to be lost in the when the lights are low, or when I'm trying to find the crib at night. Like, I don't know how that's going to be with the color being the same. And he was like, absolutely no problem. He sprayed it down with a white coating. And then he got to work with the design on the bifold doors. And those bifold doors, I mean, the entire experience is just life-changing for me, because not only am I able to operate it and open up one side, as David mentioned, for safety reasons and keeping one side closed, but I'm really able to get face-to-face with my daughter, as you saw in that video. And flash forward, I mean, that was probably when my daughter was about 4 or 5 months old. My daughter's 17 months old now, so she's very functional. She's running, she's jumping, she's everywhere, and she still uses that crib every single day. And she loves me coming up to her after nap time and being able to play with her through the crib slots and, you know, all those types of things, and be really face to face with her. But here's a knock-on benefit that we didn't even expect. This is a huge benefit for my wife. My wife is able-bodied and is ambulatory and is standing, but she says, I can't believe how much this is saving my back, because the height of the crib means I don't have to lean down and grab our daughter, who's now 22 to 24 pounds, up and out every single day. And when I did an interview on Accessible Media Inc. about this crib after we successfully completed the project, even one of the producers came on AMI TV and said, why aren't all cribs designed exactly this way? I'm able-bodied, my wife is able-bodied. We would love all cribs to be manufactured this way, because it just makes more sense and it's easier for an interaction process. So David, you and your team, you nailed the design out of the park. I will be honest in saying we have made slight modifications since receiving the crib. We replaced the latch style locks for locking in the bifold doors with spring-loaded locks, so I could do it with one hand. So basically just being able to push down a spring-loaded lock into the mechanism you created, and being able to push a button to unlock the spring loader is a lot easier for the lack of dexterity that I have. But other than that, it's made a huge difference for me. And I'm beside myself. Like, regardless of winning in the West Coast for Tetra, the big win came from actually having the crib. And this is going to be something that when we're done with the crib, I hope that we can issue it out on a secondhand market for someone else with a disability with similar specs chairs that could use this as well, because they're few and far between and you can't really come across them. I also did some fun things. I installed LED lighting on the bottom of the crib, so when my daughter's playing, she can play underneath the crib in the space where my knees would go, and we can install curtains and things, but we can turn on LED lights so she can be in blue, red, pink, whatever colors that she wants when she's playing. So it's actually much more than just a crib. It's an entertainment center. It's an entertainment console for her. And most importantly, David, it's safe. So thank you for that.
You can tell Marco's in media.
I
Very
appreciate
good, thank
that.
you.
Yeah,
It's
thanks.
nice. Karen, Marco's wife, friended me on Facebook, so I've been able to see their child grow up and utilize the crib. So thank you for that. And I'll take into account the mods you made underneath for future designs. That's cool.
Well, this truly is a project that sounds like it was about joint collaboration. And one of the things, David, I wanted to follow up on that you mentioned, you talked about there's a variety of different crib models. As a volunteer, I know you're seeing more requests for parents with disabilities. And quite often, as Marco said, what you create not only helps the person with the disability, but it helps other family members as well.
Thank you.
So and certainly in the 35 years of Tetra, one of the things that has definitely grown in requests is adapted cribs. And as you said, Marco, when your family no longer needs the crib, if you are able to pass it on, I'm sure it'll find a good home. Well, I wanted to thank you both for sharing your collaboration together, and thank you for sharing with us here. And I'm so glad that this project has been a success and is still being used today.
Well, I know that we'd be preaching to the choir to the majority of the people that are on the Zoom call today with regards to applauding the services of Tetra Society and everything that's available. But for anyone who's out there who's on the fence, or anyone who's listening today, just trying to learn more about what the services that are offered, I'm not being paid to say this in any stretch or anything like that. I truly urge you, if you can, if you have a project that you need, Tetra, even before I applied for the project, I knew, because of friends and other people who'd accessed the services in the past, that this was going to be the road. And I almost was concerned that I wasn't going to qualify, to be a client. I was thinking to myself, well, I'm pretty capable, and maybe there are only specific types of projects. And I had my fingers crossed, because in the disability community, we're a large community, but we're a small community. And so you get to know some of the vendors and service providers that are out there that are doing life-changing things. And I don't know where I would be without what Tetra was able to provide to me today. So I'm just beside myself. And I know that this is a team that I can trust, that if there's future projects potentially that I need for adaptation as I go forward, I assume that that's something that I can come to again through Tetra and really help, not only to create a life-changing experience for me, but also to create new iterations of projects where even the designers and volunteers are learning something new about themselves, or new ways to approach innovations and challenges. And as an accessibility consultant, universal design consultant, that is one of the craziest things that you can do, is learn more about how things function to make it easier for everybody. And so I think it's just as much of a case study as it is a project for making someone's life successful.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Often we go into a client's home for a specific project, and they're unaware of other accessories that we can provide. So as Eric knows, I'll come out with 5 or 6 projects from starting with one, because the client isn't aware of the options they have. So how do you get into bed? How do you reach to the stove? When you wheel, do you have lights? Do you have visibility, that kind of thing? And it grows from there.
Exactly. So thank you so much, Eric. Thank you so much to the team. I'm indebted to you. I'm still using the crib today, as I say, and I really hope that this echoes across the nation, literally, and people say, why have I not picked up the phone and shown great respect? And not the least of which, David and his team were able to do this all during the crux of COVID, during when we really were going through the pandemic, with certain restrictions and things, and we were still able to make this happen, safely, and still be able to communicate remotely and virtually, and until he had to come on site in person. And so I think that speaks to the strength and to the tenacity of the team throughout this entire project.
Well, thank you so much, Marco. And I just want to confirm, we are a nonprofit. So when Marco said he wasn't paid to say any of this, I can say that that's true. And Marco is just a great, genuine ambassador. And David is a shining example of our volunteers, but he's just one example. So I do want to take this moment to thank all the volunteers who really are the heart and the technical aspect of a completed project, that take Marco type request and turn it into a crib that's used every day. So thank you both so much for joining us, and it's been a great way to really kick off this TetraCon. So thank you both.
Thank you.
For your time.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to get back to my daughter now.
Okay, excellent. All right. So hopefully that gives everybody an idea. As you heard David say, it gives everybody an idea of what Tetra can do, and you never know what a project might be. So that literally is how you can send in a request. As you heard, Marco and I spoke, and you can speak to a chapter coordinator in your area. If you're watching today, go to our website at www.tetrasociety.org, find the chapter near you. There are plenty of great people that you can speak to, and they'll help you take down your request, and we'll see if we can turn it into a project like you just heard. It is time for a break. So, and we do have prizes, good old Tim Hortons, right? We're a national conference, so we might as well stick to something that's national. I'm going to ask Josh to do a door prize, and it's 9:15 right now. So from 9:15 to 9:30, we'll do some door prizes and take a little break, and then get back into the formal part of our programming at 9:30. So Josh, if you wouldn't mind, I'll get you to do some door prizes, and whoever name is drawn, they will be a winner of a Tim Hortons gift card.
Sounds great. The first winner is Felix Fei, F-E-I. I'll also be typing it out in chat.
All right. Felix, I don't know if you're on, but that's great. And Josh, we should mention you're doing the draws. It's on a virtual drum, right? So we're drawing at random. So anybody has a chance. Josh, would you mind doing 2 more draws, please?
For sure.
Hi, Josh. Is it possible to show that wheel?
Unfortunately, it isn't right now. It's on a virtual
Okay.
door prize picker. So all the names have been inputted. There's over 118, and we're checking each one and randomly generating the winner.
You'll have to just mentally make your own draw prize sounds.
And the second winner is, one moment, Penny.
Josh, would you mind just turning on your camera though, so we can see your face?
For sure, one moment.
And I have the privilege of working with Josh, so I'm not shy to ask him that. He'll be presenting later today. And you do have a great smiling face. So as you do the third draw, we'll just get you to turn your camera on if you don't mind.
Sounds great. And the third draw, I'm going to do right now. The third winner is Romulo.
Perfect. Can you just reread out those 3 winners, Josh?
Sure. The first winner is Felix. The second winner is Penny. And the third winner is Romulo. And I'll be typing these all in the chat.
Great. And I noticed in the chat as well, Sylvia, our national coordinator, is always great at this. She typed in the link of where you can go to get your own request for assistance to meet with a volunteer in your area. So thank you, Sylvia, for doing that. I'm going to go back to screen sharing because what we really want to celebrate is Tetra through 35 years. And our summer student, Sonam, put together a great kind of PowerPoint presentation of Tetra through the years. as Sylvia put in the chat, that was a great presentation done by our summer students. It makes me very proud to be a part of Tetra over the years. The only problem is it does make me feel old because I recognize most of those projects, and perhaps some of our longtime coordinators will recognize the devices they've done as well. I do want to promote what's coming up in 6 minutes. We're going to have Kevin and Penny speak, and we've kind of already touched on customized assistive devices that you can use in your everyday life. But what happens when you want to travel and get outside your normal comfort zone? Well, this is something that Kevin has mastered, so I look forward to hearing him talk about his accessible travel adventures, or maybe lack of accessibility and how he dealt with that. So that'll be coming up in 6 minutes, your local time. It's 9:24 here. And again, thanks everybody for joining us. I did want to mention that we had over 100 people registered this year. So I want to thank our comms team and everybody who Sylvia's really been spearheading this year's TetraCon, so it's been great to see an increase of participation. And Sylvia, if you wouldn't mind, I'll just stop screen sharing for a moment. You and I have worked together for over 20 plus years, and I want to give you full credit because you were the one that found the documentation that officially said Tetra's been around for 35 years. Do you guys realize that? So I just thought, since we were going to do this TetraCon anyway, but we really are celebrating, and the tagline for this year's TetraCon is 35 years of innovation and inclusion coast to coast. And can't stress that coast to coast enough. The work done across Canada is so great. And Sylvia, for those who don't know, you're in Ontario. You're our national coordinator, and I was just wondering if there's a couple of memories that stick out for you over your time with Tetra.
Thanks, Eric. Yes. I started out as a volunteer. So I did some of the projects, the earlier projects, and my brother, of course, was the chapter coordinator in Hamilton, so he roped me in. That's how I started that many years ago. And what really sticks out for me, and I've said this many, many times before, is when we started making the accessible cribs. I think seeing families, people with disabilities having families, is just amazing for me. And it makes me tear up every time, because no longer are we, trying to adapt just forks and knives, which we still do. There's nothing wrong with that. But we've gone beyond that. And I think today's TetraCon, with the topics that we have, shows that. And so that's one of the things I really enjoy. We've made about 20 cribs here, I think, in Ontario over the last 20 years. And we've recycled most of them. So they've gone from one family to another, changed colors, perhaps, painted it for the next client, made sure that it was all safe and put together properly. So that's one of my major things that always sticks out with me, is the cribs.
And kind of how Tetra has changed, maybe as the project requests have changed. So, and as you said, Sylvia, you kind of hinted at it, we're going to talk about a number of great topics. Again, coming up in 3 minutes, we're going to hear from Kevin Penny, and he's in Halifax, and he's going to talk about traveling with challenges and how you overcome that. At 9:55 my time, we're going to introduce kind of Tetra and sports, right? It's a warm September here in Vancouver, but eventually winter is going to be coming, and every year I hear from people about, oh, it's dark, rainy weather, and I see our coordinators in Windsor, like Dave Harshaw, and what can you participate in when it's snowing and the weather is bad? So we're going to talk about that at 9:55. And as we were scrolling through Tetra through the years, I saw an adapted video game project, and we're gonna talk about some adaptions. I'm going to talk about at 10:35 NetClay, because I would say the two main things that have grown is projects for children or to help parents with children with Tetra, and then definitely to connect with the computer and to connect with technology. So I'm going to talk about NetClay at 10:35, and then we're going to have Alex Carey talk about, and he is a video gamer and he's a designer. He's an advocate for accessible video gaming. So that's going to happen at close to 11 o'clock my time. So we do have some other great presentations coming up, and it's 9:29 now. So I'll scroll through the list. I might ask Josh, is Kevin online with us at the moment?
I'll give a quick check. Kevin Penny is
I am here.
online. Yep.
All right, perfect. Well, without further ado, Kevin, I had the privilege of meeting you years ago. You reminded me of how long we've known each other, because in 2006, you were participating in Mobility Cup. It was hosted here in Vancouver. For those who don't know, Mobility Cup is a fully adapted sailing regatta. You are a sailor, and you had your spinal cord injury, correct me if I'm wrong, in 1991. But you haven't let that stop you. You went on to do sailing. And what I remember, Kevin, because I was jealous, is speaking of door prizes, we had a prize, a Vancouver Canucks jersey, and you won that prize back in 2006 and have been sailing and competing. And you went on to start the Accessible Adventures platform. So I thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll turn it over to you to talk about kind of your adventures of traveling and how this all came to be.
All right, great, Eric. Thanks again for Tetra for having me today. It's a pleasure. Eric said a little bit about myself, but I'll give a little bit of context. I'm currently 46 years old. I had a spinal cord injury at the age of 15. I was in a bicycle accident with my sister, actually. We were on a tandem bike, and from that accident, I suffered a spinal cord injury that left me paralyzed from the chest down. 15 was kind of a tough year for me. For that to happen, I was very much into sports and physical stuff, and it was tough at first, but I don't want to talk a whole lot about that today. I'm going to talk about some of my travel adventures and go over some. And I don't know if we'll have time for questions, but hopefully we might have a few minutes for questions. But yeah, so as many of you may know on the call, traveling as a person with a disability, especially someone who has a mobility impairment and uses a mobility aid such as a wheelchair, can be quite challenging. I never really started traveling, and when I say traveling, I mean by airplane, until 1997, which was my first trip. So I've learned a lot over the years about traveling, especially airplane travel, things that work for me, things that can help the airport staff kind of assist you with the disability. And I'll go over a few of those things, but I just want to make a preamble. When I travel, things don't always go right. There will be barriers that I will face that will make it more challenging. So sometimes I have to think on the fly. We have to make, my chair gets broke, we have to kind of make arrangements to get that fixed as quickly as possible. But in general, I've learned over the past 20 years of traveling some tips and tricks, which I want to kind of share with you guys today. And I can only speak as a wheelchair user. That's the lens I speak from. That's what I live every day. So I would say that one of the major things when it comes to traveling is preparation, planning. I've done it both ways, where you can kind of go on the fly and figure things out when you get there. But I've learned the hard way sometimes that pre-planning really, really helps. And those pre-planning things, for me, for example, living in Nova Scotia, when it comes to specifically air travel, is trying to book well in advance and hoping that you can book an itinerary where airplanes can accommodate your wheelchair. And I'll give you an example. I'm a pretty tall guy. I'm 6'5". I have a big chair. I have a head array headrest that I use to drive my chair. So it's quite large. And different aircraft, depending on their size, have a different opening of the doorway to get your chair, because the chair actually goes in the luggage department where all the other luggage goes. And this is where problems typically occur when it comes to breaking chairs or mishandling them. So I try to book an airplane. An Airbus typically are good. Boeing 787s, their doorways are high enough that they can get my chair into that compartment without having to manipulate it by tilting it or putting it on its side. Air Canada, for example, will not put wheelchairs on its side. So with that airline, you have to be very cognizant. And WestJet flies with 737 Boeings, and their doorway are high enough. So for my chair, it does have to be put on its side. So when booking, I try to find airplanes that are most accommodating to make it as easy as possible for myself, the airplane staff, people who are loading your chair, etc., so that I can have a more successful journey. Because you can imagine if I get to my destination and I have no power chair, it really changes what your vacation is going to look like. I rely on that for independence. So for me, the pre-planning usually starts out with making sure that you can get to where you're going on the airfare and that the planes will be able to accommodate you. Doesn't always work. We all been on airplanes where at the last minute they'll change a flight, often change the airplane. So I have been stuck at airports where I'm expecting to get on an Air Canada flight, for example, that would be big enough to accommodate my chair. They changed the flight, they changed the airplane, and there I am stuck and not able to fly with my wheelchair. So I either I've had to fly without it and wait for it the next day, or just wait for another flight that has an airplane that can accommodate me. That's very frustrating, but it's part of the deal of traveling. Hotel accommodations are always a big issue for me. I require specific things, especially for long journeys. Mainly the washroom is very important, so make sure that I can book something that has an accessible shower. I ask lots of questions about that. I don't just say, does it have a roll-in shower? Sometimes I'll even ask for pictures, dimensions, all those things to ensure that when I get there, I know that it's going to accommodate me, because trying to scramble after the fact is always challenging. I travel with a lift as well, a hoist to get me in and out of my chair and into bed. So I always ask questions. This is a common thing I run into when I travel at hotels, is the underneath side of the bed, because the hoist is on wheels and goes under, is often not accessible, meaning that there's a box under the bed. So your legs of your hoist will only go in maybe 8 to 10 inches, which is not large enough, or you just can't get, there's not enough height to get the lift under. So I always ask those questions. Those are the main common things that I ask when it comes to pre-planning. So airfare accommodations are the two big things. Now, one of the biggest challenges that I have when I travel is accessible transportation. Lack of it. I'm a huge lover of warmth, so I travel south quite a bit. So some of the places I've been would be California, Florida, where I've been able to easily rent an accessible van while I'm on vacation. But other places I've gone to don't have those options. So you really have to try to research to ensure, one of all, if you have to get from the airport to, say, an all-inclusive resort, or the airport to a cruise ship, to really pinpoint that accessible transportation to get to and from. I usually prefer to try to rent my own vehicle. It's just easier, because dealing with accessible taxis in cities or public transit sometimes can take more time than it's worth, especially when you're in a new city or an unfamiliar city. So those are the three things that I try to really hone down before I decide where I'm going to go. I've had great experiences at some places and not so great experiences at other places, but that doesn't really interrupt my passion to travel. And as Eric mentioned, I am a disabled sailor, and I use specialized technology to sail my boat. And I do own my own disabled sailing or accessible sailing boat. So that's really enabling me to travel a bit more on the sailing front of things and be able to sail in different parts of Canada and even parts of the United States. So that's been a lot of fun. I would say that's more global travel that I want to talk about, but I do want to talk a little bit about what's going on here in Nova Scotia, especially with regards to accessible recreation. We do live in what's called Canada's Ocean Playground of Nova Scotia. So we are surrounded by water, which means we have many beaches throughout our province. And more and more of those beaches and recreational trails are becoming more and more accessible due to awareness. A lot of people might be familiar with Moby mats, the mats that lay on top of the sand so you can drive your power wheelchair and get onto the beach as opposed to watching from a boardwalk or from the distance. I often will use floating beach wheelchairs, which I saw there was a beach wheelchair in one of the slideshows from Tetra's, the history of Tetra. So more and more beaches are having those available for persons like myself. For example, Sunday's supposed to be a great day. I plan on heading to a beach that has those facilities and enjoy the day. So researching those things and having those things available have really enhanced my life when it comes to travel. I love to travel. I'll talk a little bit about social media and how that kind of came involved, because I did travel quite a bit and I'd always have people question me, how do you do this? What do you do? What do you do in this situation? And my former partner, Dee, and I started a social media platform in 2017 called Accessible Adventurers, where we kind of started showcasing our adventures and really putting an accessible, disabled twist on it and how we overcome, how I do things, and how it's not that much, it's not that different. I just do things differently. And in 2007, when we started that, it really took a while to kind of pick up. Our friends and family were some of our first followers, but then COVID hit really, and things started to really boom in our world on social media. Our following continued to increase. We got more partnerships with organizations, been asked for consulting advice on accessibility and tourism specifically, and travel, but other things as well. And that social media platform that we've developed has really allowed me and to reach out to a global audience to talk about some of the things I do and really help other individuals with disabilities. I think is the hugest thing, to see that someone with a severe disability can do these things, or it is possible. Yeah, it's challenging, but it is possible. And from what I've gained from travel throughout my life, it's far beyond just the travel. I've met friends, and I still have friends from many places. I have memories, and I just love to explore this world. And I really learned that the more tools I have in my toolbox when it comes to traveling, the more IT stuff I have to make it more comfortable, the more apt I am to continue to travel, even though I'm getting older and it's challenging. I still feel like I have the ability to do that. And if I can showcase that to other individuals and give them really become brave, because it is scary. I mean, the idea of breaking your wheelchair or something major happen to that is so scary and real for many individuals. And so for me, it's been a great time. I can, even though my partner and I have separated, I still plan on continuing showcasing my travels on social media so that people can ask questions, see by example, and just kind of bring people's spirits up that, yeah, this can still happen even though you have a very severe physical challenge. I'm going to kind of leave it at there, Eric. I would love to open it up to questions if possible. I think some of the best learning comes from questions, and hopefully there'll be some questions in the crowd. And just to let you know, the handle is @accessible adventurers. Maybe someone can put that in the chat for me. We've done over 100 YouTube videos ranging from 5 minutes to 20 minutes about journeys, and it's usually from my perspective as a person with a disability, and we kind of tell stories and want to bring people on with us on the adventures that we would go on. So Eric, I'm hoping we can, I didn't clear this with you first, but I guess I'm in charge right now. This is my session, so I guess I can open it up to questions.
We do have time for questions, absolutely. So, and Sylvia did put in the chat uh, at Accessible Adventures. So I have a question. I myself, I have cerebral palsy, and I find traveling stressful. And you mentioned, many people's fears is, what if my wheelchair breaks down? Has that ever happened to you, and how do you overcome that? Do you have any tips on trying to get the airlines to understand that basically your wheelchair is an extension of your body? How can you convey that message?
I don't trust anyone, Eric, so I communicate. From the time I show up at the airport to checking in till I request to speak to the people who are going to handle my wheelchair, who's going to be responsible to put it on the airplane. I'll ask, how are they putting it on the airplane? Is it going in a can or a case, or do they have to put it on its side? I've learned to show them where to put it in neutral, so they're not trying to push it while it's engaged and do things. So I really communicate with them a lot, and I've learned that I have rights as a traveler with a disability, that they cannot deny you that access. They have to provide you that, to meet with someone, to talk to those people, and it's good for them as well, because they can learn the chair and know how to handle it properly. The most time it gets broken, though, Eric, is when it goes on that lovely little conveyor belt that takes luggage into the airplane. That's where she breaks. They'll put it on its side, or I've been in the airplane watching them. They'll pick it up. They don't realize how heavy it is. 2 or 3 people will try to pick it up and they'll drop it. So yes, to answer your question, have had issues where it breaks. One tip that I do is, if I'm going somewhere, say for example, if I was going on vacation in California, in advance, I would search out a potential vendor that would be able to fix the type of chair that I have, find contact information so that if it does break, airlines usually cover the cost, but the quicker you can get it to someone to fix, obviously the quicker you get it back. So I often will try to search out someone in advance and say, listen, especially with my head array controls, because it's kind of specialized, that if I went somewhere and say that broke, that I could obtain another one and put it on and continue on my journey.
So planning ahead, planning ahead, planning ahead.
So much planning, and I don't, sometimes that's hard, but you have to, for success you do. Planning and communication are the 2 key things.
Any other questions for Kevin?
I think I saw a question in the chat asking if I've ever been on a cruise. I don't know who asked that, but I think I saw that.
I did, Kevin. Sylvia here.
Oh, have I ever been on a cruise? So the answer is yes. I'm actually going on a cruise in February. My first cruise since COVID, but I was counting before the session. I've been very lucky to go on 9 different cruises. And the reason I keep going back to cruising is, I would say the physical cruise ships, the bigger ones or the more modern ones, are probably one of the most accessible places in the world. I really say that. It's a floating city, but for example, the accessible staterooms are bigger. They have roll-in showers. Most doors, like from different areas of the ship, are automatic sensors, so they'll just open as I go through. I don't have to worry. I'm not able to push a traditional wheelchair button unless I'm lucky and can bang it the right way. But for me, cruise ship is great. It's easy for people, my staff or whoever travels with me, because you only have to unpack once. You don't have to lug a wheelchair, a lift, luggage, all the things that I need to go on an extended vacation from place to place. The staff is amazing. They're helpful. It's just for me, and most cruise ship ports are accessible. I mean, some of the ones in more remote countries don't always have options for excursions, but I've had really good luck even just going to the certain ports of call and just rolling around for the day and enjoying and taking in the cultures. So yeah, I do have a bit of and I love being on the water as a sailor. I just love being on the water. So, and I'm a heat worshiper. So in February, in the dead of winter here in Halifax, I will be journeying down to Miami and hopping on a cruise ship and enjoying 7 days in paradise. And by the way, the food is really good too.
Yeah, that's why I asked Kevin, because I knew I've spoken to a lot of people and they mention that cruises are almost the ideal spot.
It certainly is. They cater to a lot of seniors are probably the biggest demographic on cruises, I would say, and a lot of them might have minor or major mobility impairments. So it works for me, and I've had great success, like so much support. And the person who travels with me benefits from that as well, because it's not all put on them.
It was mentioned in the chat, makes us want to take a cruise. I think that's for many people, especially when, Kevin, you were talking about when the weather is bad. I had another question. When I've traveled, a hassle for me is hotel beds. They're quite high. So what's some of your strategies with that and transfers?
I mentioned a bit in my presentation. So when I travel, I take a Hoyer lift. So I have a portable Hoyer lift that I take. I could have an option of renting it where I go somewhere, but sometimes that's not always easy and can be expensive. So for me, the height can be a challenge. And sometimes you go into, especially when you go into fancier hotels, the bed is like, seems like 4 feet off the ground. You need a ladder to get into it. But I have to be cognizant of that because the lift will only lift me up so high. And if I don't get clearance to get onto the bed, it can be more difficult for the person doing it. But as I mentioned, the biggest thing for me with the bed is what's underneath that bed. I've been promoting to hotels constantly when this happens. I'm like, if you're having an accessible room, you need to put that bed on a bed frame with wheels so it could be easily moved. If someone had to make more room in the room to make it for their wheelchair to get into work for them. And it's still a struggle. I think one of the funniest answers, I'm like, why is that box underneath the bed? And basically it's so people won't put stuff under the bed and leave it there. It's for cleaning purposes. So if you go to a hotel and the bed's not accessible, keep pushing, because it should be part of the accessibility standard of an accessible room is to ensure that the bed is at an appropriate height and that there is clearance underneath for individuals that might need that, which is fairly not that uncommon, I guess. Quite a few people we hear have this issue all the time.
I just had another question. You mentioned in your presentation, you started in 1997 doing travel. Now you've gained more experience, but the actual airlines and things and hotels, have you found people are getting more aware? Is it getting better, or is it the same challenges you've always dealt?
It's definitely getting better, especially the airlines. I think there's more and more awareness of that. And I think for myself too, I'm one that really will push the envelope. I will advocate for myself. I kind of know what's right and what's wrong just from experience. And not everyone knows that, but air travel is getting a bit better. They're coming up with different mechanisms to make it easier for airport staff to get your chair into the airplane. For example, I went to Hawaii back in April, and we had a flight from Toronto directly to Honolulu. And first time I've seen it in Toronto, they had a ramped type thing that my chair would go up. They push my chair up on. And then it was a hydraulic hoist or electric hoist that would lift it up to the conveyor belt, and then they could roll it right off. So I've never seen, I don't know why more airports don't have this as a universal thing, because it saves both my wheelchair and it saves staff work injuries of trying to lift chairs. It just makes more sense. And I asked them in Toronto, I'm like, is this something that's new? And they've said, no, we've had years, but it's not available on every flight. They might have 1 or 2 at the airport. So things like that are getting better. Airlines have medical desks now, which you can contact, and they'll give some accommodations. So say, for example, I need to travel with an attendant. I can't travel by myself. So within Canada, if I fly, I meet the criteria to have somebody fly with me. You can just get paperwork filled out through your doctor and submit that to the airlines. Not everyone knows that. That can save a lot of money, especially if you're traveling and you don't have to pay for 2. I'm a tall fella, so one of the other accommodation sizes I get is they'll try to get me up into what's called premium economy or business class. Usually it's premium economy with more leg room, because literally in some of these smaller planes, it's very difficult to even get me into the seat because of my height. Some people who, there's similar accommodations for people who are obese based on a disability, so they can sometimes get a second seat covered if they need that. So more and more awareness. It's just being an advocate for yourself. And I'm lucky that I always have someone traveling with me who's familiar and can showcase things, but they're listening more. It used to be I'd show up at the airport, I'd get ready to go on the plane, and they would just do whatever they quickest to get on the plane. But now I make sure that everyone's communicating with each other to know what I need to be safely put on the plane, what I need for support, and it seems to get a bit better. But every day on our Instagram, not every day, but quite a bit, we hear stories from people we follow whose chairs are still completely damaged. Airlines are not being accountable for it, and it's just wrong. They don't treat able-bodied passengers that way when it comes to things, and so it can be frustrating. But the last few trips that I had been on by airplane have gone really well. So I guess I would say I feel it is getting better.
Well,
I think the big thing that's got to change, though, Eric, I'll just add this, is it's a bigger issue. My goal is one day I will be able to board an airplane in my power wheelchair, get safely secured in the airplane, and stay there on my own. And there's movements for this, but it's going to take an appetite for airline engineers and manufacturers to make the airplanes accommodate that, whether it's an adaptation or it's a permanent spot on an airplane. But I still believe that someday I will be able to. My hope is that I will be able to roll onto an airplane like I would roll onto a train or a bus and be in my comfort zone and still travel safely. And the ironic thing is what I always find interesting is I've had my chair break and have had bills up to $5,000 that the airline will cover. So if they think it around the other way, the money they're spending to repair problems that could be avoided could so much be turned around as a return on investment to improve the accessibility, not try to just fix what's broken, but prevent that from happening. So if we lobby out there more and more, and there's different laws, because under the American with Disabilities Act, unfortunately, air travel is exempt. All of the other types of transportation have to have some form of accessibility where you can stay in your chair, and airlines are exempt. So it's going to be a political pressure, people with disabilities advocating to push for this, and I can still continue to do it and hope that one day it will not be an issue. I won't have to worry about all that added stress when traveling, but whether or not my wheelchair is going to get there in one piece.
yeah, I think many people attending, myself included, want to see that dream become a reality.
Exactly.
I want to give you, there is another question in the chat. Aside from being on a cruise, what is the most accessible place you have ever gone? The person writes, I'm paranoid to travel to other places because of my fear of lack of accessibility, for example, roads and sidewalks. So what's a place for somebody who's starting out where you would say, hey, go here and you'll have a great time?
In Canada, I say Vancouver is the most accessible city in Canada. I've been there several times. I find it so easy to get around. I don't have to worry. I can get a taxi when I want to. I could get on a bus. I could get on a ferry. I mean, there's so many options. But I would say one of the more, I've been to Europe. I've been to Australia and New Zealand. But honestly, the more accessible place is the United States. And I think it's because of the American with Disabilities Act and things growing over time. I would say if you really want to have a good experience, depending how far you're able to travel, Florida is great. I've been to Orlando, obviously. I've been to Miami. I've been to Fort Lauderdale. And all those places have great sidewalks. The weather helps as well because they don't get snow very often. So everything seems to be really good. So I would say that would be a great bet. But if it's within Canada, I think if you can make it to Vancouver in the summertime, you're gonna have a good time and have a good experience, I would say.
Well,
The least accessible places are unfortunately when you go to developing countries. It just doesn't exist. I was in Costa Rica for a month and loved my adventure to Costa Rica. but accessibility was challenging. I never saw anybody else in a wheelchair for the whole month I was there. So that just tells you there why people aren't out, because the services just really aren't there to support that.
Vancouver tourism should hire you to for the plugs that you gave to Vancouver.
Yeah, but I just know, I don't know why it is. I think it's a newer city and they've promoted that. There's a lot of people with disabilities, with mobility challenge specifically, that live in the BC area, probably because it is more accessible. There's more access to programs, recreation. So yeah, Tourism BC, hire me. I'm your man.
Sounds like a plan, Kevin. I want to thank you for your time and sharing your stories. And I expected nothing less but to hear that you're planning on traveling in the immediate future. I just want to give you a chance again to say your Instagram account or your Twitter account.
So I'm not on the Twitter. So for the next little, we're going to be rebranding, or I am too. It's going to become Accessible Adventuring, where it will be more focused on me. As I said, it used to be me and my partner, but we're not together anymore. So you'll see stories, mainly Instagram stories and Facebook stories and posts. Not many YouTube videos. It takes a long time and I work full time, but the odd time we might throw a YouTube video up there of one of my travels. And if you go on the YouTube channel, you'll see a lot of things. Like I just went to a very accessible resort, first all-inclusive in Mexico in March, and really showcased that one. It was beyond my expectations for accessibility. So we usually do that and show the room of where we're at, the process. So check them out, and hopefully you'll be able to get some ideas and some tips from those as well.
Excellent. And we did share that on the TetraCon website.
All right, then.
Your bio. So thank you so much. Again, really appreciate it. And I've definitely learned a lot. And I've been thinking about a cruise, and I think talking to you, maybe you've motivated me to, that'll be a plan for 2023. So thank you so much, Kevin.
No problem.
Greatly appreciate it.
All right, you guys have a great conference.
You have a great day as well.
Thank you.
That was Kevin Penny. Look for his updates and his latest adventures. And now we're going to move into kind of our next topic. I hope everybody's doing all right. Take a moment to stretch and such. We're going to talk about sports and Tetra projects. So I'm going to go back to screen sharing here. And I'm going to turn it over to Sylvia.
Thanks, Eric. We wanted to showcase some of the Tetra travel projects we've done in the past. And recently, Toronto and their volunteer, Ron there, made a wheelchair passenger platform on the back of a wheelchair, which also could carry luggage. So it flips up and is easy. We also found out that this client is part of the Canadian Power Wheelchair Hockey Association, and they actually took this device with them to Switzerland for their tournament in August. So let's have a look at it.
Hello, my name is Ron Seiden and I'm a volunteer with the Tetra Society. The challenge for this project was to create a rear platform for a powered wheelchair that could be used for carrying an additional person on the back, but also large enough to attach luggage or other materials. It had to be a flip-up design and easily mounted to the wheelchair. I came up with this design, which is made from aluminum with a non-skid surface. It's reinforced at the back with angle irons here and here to reinforce the angles. The mounting is via these two ears, which attach onto the anchor eyes that are integral to the wheelchair. So this would simply slide into one of those eyes, then the other side goes in, and then this pin goes in to hold it in that position. The unit then will be allowed to swivel up out of the way and held by a bungee cord, or drop down to be in the service position. Because it's extended out to carry larger parcels, it's supported at the back by a swivel caster. I'll now show it to you in the installed position. So this is the wheelchair that we're going to mount the flip up rear platform to, and you can see the two tie down eyes at the back. And now I will install the platform and show you after it's installed. So now we're going to install the platform. Simply put the one end into this eye, and then this goes into the other eye. Slide it to the left, put in the R key to hold it so it can't come out, and there you have it. The platform's installed, and it can be flipped up and held there with the bungee cord. Okay, thank you very much.
That's a great video. Ron is one of our really good volunteers, longtime volunteers in Toronto. Excuse me. I think we have another, is that another video? I think.
I believe so, yes.
Excellent. Okay, let it go.
We'll see.
Hello, my name is Ron Seiden, and I'm a volunteer with the Tetra Society. The challenge for this project was to create a rear platform on a powered wheelchair for an able-bodied person to stand, and it was to do without modifying the wheelchair in any way. Luckily, the rear swivel wheels of the wheelchair were mounted onto very sturdy 45 millimeter diameter sockets, and the idea was to attach that platform to those two sockets. After much research, I found this split clamp, which has a 45 millimeter internal diameter, and the split clamp is held together with bolts, so that when it's dropped over the swivel sockets and then bolted together, it will be anchored firmly. And then the idea was to bolt the platform to this split clamp with these bolts here. And that's exactly what I did. And here is the platform. It's made from aluminum with a non-skid surface. It's reinforced on the back with an additional plate, and you can see here's one of the split clamps mounted. So this would just simply drop over the rear of the wheelchair onto the swivel sockets, clamp the split clamp onto the socket, and then bolt this plate in place. I'll now show you it in the installed position. Okay, so now we're going to mount the rear platform to this wheelchair. And you can see the two spindle sockets to which the platform will be attached. Okay, so now we're going to just simply drop the rear platform onto the two spindle sockets. After I put them on, I'm going to tighten the two bolts here so that this split clamp grabs firmly. And then I'm simply going to tighten these two bolts on each side. So it just goes on simply like this, and that's it. After I tighten these bolts and these, it's finished. Thank you.
So this is the next project here. I actually was the volunteer on this project. As Kevin was talking, it's very difficult to go from your electric wheelchair onto the little chair that they take down the aisle in the airplane. And we had a client that required assistance to transfer, And so he was getting hurt every time he was transferring in an airplane. He loves Vegas, so he continues to go to Vegas. And he presented me with a partially completed sling here that he received from the fire department. I'm not sure how he got it, but he did. And it only had the 4 blue straps in the corners. And I believe that's to carry people out from, you know, burning houses and et cetera, et cetera. So I proceeded to sew all this strapping on to reinforce it, because he is a heavier gentleman, with all these side rings made from the same strapping, and at the top as well and at the bottom. And so what he does in the morning is he puts this sling in his electric wheelchair, then he transfers into it, goes to the airport that way. They can then easily transfer him onto the airport little tiny chair that goes down the aisle, and then they can easily lift him using this sling into his seat, and that this sling stays with him in his seat, so they can transfer him back out on the other end. So this is another device that we've made for traveling, and I think we have one more that Eric's going to talk about.
Indeed we do. So this, again, this is to give you another idea. You'll see in this video, I love the visual of it, taken all the way to France. So just another type of way that you can get around. There has been questions in the chat of when I'm traveling, how do I overcome curbs? Well, here's the real life example.
Shooting down through every degree, girl. Oh, she's rocking down the dark and dusty trail, gone hip to hip, rocking through the wilderness and around the world. The trip begins with a kiss. Oh, if you want to.
I should give a thank you to her husband who helped put the video together. Just to make up some time, and we do want to get to our next topic. So if you have any questions, we can answer that on the break, or do put them into the chat. But I'll move along, and I'll ask Sylvia to introduce kind of our next video. And Sylvia? Is Sylvia there? This is, she might be offline momentarily.
Oh, sorry, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So these, we're getting into sports projects that we do at Tetra, and I just want to introduce Joe. He's going to be speaking about the project that was done for him in Halifax, and then we'll show the CBC video as well. So Joe, are you around? Maybe you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm right here.
Excellent.
Hi, Sylvia.
Hi.
So where do I start? I start at the beginning. I'm an amputee, and I've been an amputee since October 21st, 1963. I had osteosarcoma. It started out as a benign tumor, but then it changed after about 18 months and some surgeries. It's a high-level amputation. It's called a hemipelvectomy. So there's no residual limb left. There's the entire limb is gone, and most of the pelvis is gone as well. So that presents different, challenges. I just want to give you a brief history over the last 59 years. It'll be brief. So anyhow, the type of limb is it's not a conventional type of artificial limb. So the socket is made around your body as opposed to the residual limb. And just kind of imagine having a cast placed around your body which is initially the way it's designed. Then the plaster is then removed, a cast is made of that, and then that will fit the body. So weight bearing is far different than it would be on a residual limb. In any case, I was 12 years old when the surgery took place, 13 when I went to Montreal to have the first limb made. And from there on, it was a learning process. And, I was a 13-year-old kid at that time walking with a cane because I couldn't, balance was a big issue. Eventually the cane went away and I was able to be, fully mobile. It still presented lots of challenges because stability and balance were always a concern. And I didn't trust it at first because what I felt was that every step that I was going to take, I'd probably end up on the ground. And so it's a matter of trust in many different ways that the limb will work and that the joints will work and all of that. So eventually that was not an issue any longer. I began to trust that it was going to work for me. So I chose professional photography as my career and studied and began working as a professional photographer. And by the time I was 20 years old, I was working in a darkroom. And so I'll advance this to the point where we are today. I've never looked at this as a disability. And I think that's important for people with disabilities, not to be seen or not to feel as though you are disadvantaged, because we can overcome anything, any challenge that we face. It's a matter of knowing that you can and being determined enough so that you make it happen. You have to be your own advocate, and in many different ways. So one of the things I couldn't do was ride a bike when I lost my leg, because my center of balance and gravity was so off because there was nothing really on the left side. There was no residual limb, so balance was a big issue. So after riding a bike with my friends for a little while and realizing that if I made a sharp left turn, I'd end up on the ground every single time with a lot of road rash, and I just stopped riding a bike, but I always wanted to. And over the years, as time went by, I got married, had 2 daughters. They're adults now, and life is good. Life has purpose and meaning, and it still does and always will. But that desire to ride a bike came back, and I went to the Tetra Society about a year ago to see if we could design a bike carrier, because I have a recumbent bike now. It's a pretty high-end recumbent bike. It's actually an entry-level racing bike. I've never raced in it, but I've done some long distance cycling with it, and it's great fun. But I had no way to transport the bike anywhere apart from getting on the bike here in my neighborhood and then connecting via city streets to these trails. And being recumbent and being low means it's not really safe. So I had lighting, I had this safety flag, and bright colored clothing to be as visible as possible. But still, the desire was to set out on the trails that we have here in Nova Scotia. We have really hundreds or thousands of kilometers of trails, rails to trails around the city and outside the city, everywhere in the province. So Tetra assigned an engineer by the name of Nick Goss, brilliant guy. So he came over and I looked at the bike and we made some measurements, and he set about designing it. And about 3 or 4 days later, he sent me a 3D rendering, which was a rendering that could be manipulated, and I could move it around, take a look at it, zoom in, zoom out. And I thought, this is brilliant. It's going to work. And I had a hitch attached to my vehicle because it required a hitch to be attached to the vehicle in order to support the carrier, which is made of aluminum, and my bike. total weight is probably, I don't know, maybe 100 and some odd pounds. And I think the capacity of the hitch is about 250 pounds. So we're within a safety zone. There were, I mean, the design from design to completion was about a year. But after seeing what he did, I'm not surprised that it took that length of time to make it happen. And so the spring, it was completed, and Nick came over. We attached it. There had to be some modifications, additional modifications made, and Nick did those. And a couple more times we had to make some changes. So we just had to tweak the carrier so that everything worked and fit, and that it was safe. Okay, because the carrier is not on wheels; it's suspended from a hitch. So there's about an 18-inch gap between the bottom of the carrier and the ground. So and it's slightly wider than my vehicle, because the bike is about almost 6.5 feet long, because it had, it's not your traditional trike. It's not really a trike. I call it. It's a tricycle. Yes, it has 3 wheels, but it has all the functionality of any bicycle that has about 27 gears. And also I was able to obtain a power assist, and that was really helpful. I try to use it as little as possible, because I want to be able to do the work. I don't want it to be easy. I want it to be hard. So,
Sorry,
coming,
go ahead, Joe.
pardon me?
Sorry, go ahead.
But coming up hills was a big, it required a lot of energy, and the extra boost from the power really helped out. So back to the bike carrier, we finally got it attached to the vehicle, did a couple of test rides around the neighborhood, and voila, it was ready to go. I contacted CBC, Colleen Jones at CBC, to see if she might be interested, because she does some really good news stories, these little mini featurettes almost every evening on CBC News locally. She does a story, and she was interested in this story because she's a cyclist and her husband is an engineer. So there was a connection. She came by, and we started here in the neighborhood. And from here, we went out to one of the trails. And this was the first time I'd used the bike on used the carrier on city streets. So I was just a little uncertain as to the functionality of it. There was some lateral movement, but that's a good thing, I think, because if it was too rigid, not such a good thing. It had to have some movement, very little and minimal, so that when you're making turns, it might lean to the left or lean to the right, but only by a couple of inches. So it was safe in that respect to take it out on city streets. We ended up on a trail called the Salt Marsh Trail, which is a beautiful trail outside of Dartmouth. And it takes us from actually a kind of a rural area out onto a salt marsh. And the trail is about 11 kilometers from the start point to the point where it ends at Lawrencetown Beach. And at that point, you're on the Atlantic Ocean. But most of the trail is on both sides, is surrounded by this marsh. And it's beautiful. You see all kinds of wildlife, and innumerable other cyclists coming and going in either direction. So Colleen came along, and she did some video out on the trail and did some drone photography, and it ended up on a 3-minute piece on the CBC News that evening.
So let's watch it.
Okay.
We've got the video lined up, Sylvia.
Hey, Jessica. Hi.
Hey, Joe. How's it going?
Going well, thanks.
Spent the whole summer out on the trails?
In golf, it's not enough to just have plan A. Because no matter how well you're hitting it, sometimes golf has other plans. Introducing the all-new High Toe 3 wedges from TaylorMade. Your game, Swiss Armified.
Had cancer, they had to amputate my left leg, of course. At that time, I refused. I tried to take that cigarette.
childhood cancer.
Oh, well.
Joe's
Halifax loves to cycle, but he had a problem. He rides a three-wheel recumbent bike, which can't be transported on a typical bike rack. Enter a Halifax engineer who solved the problem. Colleen Jones has more.
Joe Robichaux's on the Salt Marsh Trail in Cow Bay on his bike, and it feels so good.
I love this. It's not asphalt, it's a trail, and it's like you're in the wilderness.
Joe's backstory? Well, in a nutshell, his love of cycling came long before his childhood cancer.
Oh, well, when I was old enough to ride one, when I had two legs. And after the surgery, I was 12 years old, 1963, had cancer. They had to amputate my left leg, of course. At that time, I refused to accept that I could not ride a bike.
Try as he did, that traditional two-wheel bike didn't work out for him. Many years later, this three-wheel hand cycle recumbent bike, it brought the joy back.
I feel a sense of freedom. Freedom from having to use crutches. It's a sense of peace and calm.
The only problem? He was always riding the same neighborhood route. Enter Nick Goss. He's an engineer who volunteers his time with the Tetra Society. That's a cross-Canada group who finds solutions to mobility and accessibility issues. He designed, then built, a bike rack for Joe.
It's a custom bike made by Invacare. So commercial solutions don't really exist, and the ones that are the closest to existing are not accessible.
After a few reworks and a little fine-tuning, the rack is ready and we're ready to roll.
We're going to load this bike and take it for a ride.
This 71-year-old is like a little kid again. Ready to rock?
Ready to roll, rock and roll. The first opportunity I've ever had to take the bike anywhere other than my neighborhood. And it's exciting because it gives me an opportunity to travel and ride any trail I choose. I remember those days really clearly before I lost my leg, that we would ride and be carefree and just have a whole lot of fun. And so I'm making up for that time now that was lost after I lost the leg. I mean, and it sure is a whole lot of fun making up that time.
Happy trails to you, Joe, and may the wind be at your back. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Cow Bay.
That was excellent exposure for the Tetra Society, and I thank you, Joe, for allowing them to do that with Nick.
Yeah, you're most welcome. I mean, that was kind of my thinking was, you know, it would be a really great little expose for the Tetra Society as well, and giving credit to the people who really made it happen.
I also want to speak about what happened afterwards. Joe became a Tetra volunteer. He has a lot of resources and has been a great benefit to not only the Halifax chapter, but to head office and everywhere else. So I thank you for that, Joe.
Most welcome.
Okay, we'll move on now to the next one. Crystal can do an introduction to her sports projects.
Thanks, Sylvia. It's my pleasure to introduce our Tetra technical volunteer, Kelly Nickel from Saskatoon, and our client, Lisa Franks. They're going to discuss the wheelchair accessible camper van that they worked on. And I believe there is a little video somewhere as well. I don't know if you two would prefer to have it before or after.
I think we could do it after. Kelly, is that okay?
Sure.
Perfect. Well, welcome both of you.
Hi.
Okay. Hello. I suppose I can start. My name is Lisa Franks. I'm in Saskatoon. I've been a wheelchair user for 26 years. And like the previous topic, I love to travel, and then I also combine that with a lot of sports activities. So I prefer to travel actually in my own vehicle. So I've done a lot of car camping in my Honda Element. It's an SUV that I've built out, and I've used that to haul surfboards and bikes. But I was hoping to go bigger. And so in 2021, I ordered a brand new van, basically a blank cargo van. And the plan was to build it out into my own camper van that was all completely wheelchair accessible. And so that happened and the van came, but as I was thinking about the design and the layout, I realized that it was just going to be so difficult to be able to carry all my equipment. So I've got a basketball wheelchair, I've got multiple styles of bikes I use, surfboard, and I was just trying to figure out how to be able to load all that independently and store it. And so I came up with the idea of just having a very versatile van. So the van in the back has a bed, but the idea was to have the bed adjustable so it could go up or down depending on what equipment I was carrying. And so that's when I reached out to Tetra and to see if they could help solve my problem. But basically I can maybe share my screen here. I've got a few pictures before I turn it over to Kelly and he can talk a bit more about the project. Is that showing up for everybody?
Yeah.
So this is my old vehicle that I used to travel around in. I couldn't get the surfboard off the roof. There's a basketball chair on the back and then a bed just inside and sometimes a bike inside. And this is what I upgraded to, a Ford Transit van. Just a blank slate. And then eventually had a bed and solar panels and a kitchen and everything installed in it. That's sort of in the progress of the build out. So you can see a bed was already in there and a water tank. That's one of the bikes I travel with. That's my wheelchair lift. And I'll save that one for later. So I guess I can turn it to Kelly now and he can talk a bit more about the project.
Sure. Initially, my scope was to design a lift just to get Lisa up onto the bed. And then we all got talking and realized that lifting the bed would be more helpful. And we kind of left that other project behind. And then more discussion led to thinking that it would be helpful if the bed could be leveled on any kind of, if she was parked on any kind of uneven surface. So it's just simply for linear actuators, off-the-shelf stuff, pretty simple. And it can lift fairly high, but the problem still was, at the time, that if there was a bike in there, Lisa would have trouble getting onto the bed. So she was scheduled to travel, and so we kind of had to stop the project, and she had to finish it on her own in California. But the electronics were just off-the-shelf stuff, pretty simple stuff. The devil was in the details, things like making sure the bed didn't slide forward in an accident situation, or flipping over to the side and tearing down the walls of her camper. So that's where all the work, the time was spent, wiring and dreaming up ways to keep it stable, yet be able to tilt and do weird maneuvers. The rest is pretty much garden variety stuff.
Okay, so we have a video, I think, accompanying it. So I'll play the video now.
Sure.
I've got a bench. It contains a porta potty in it, and it doubles as a seat for if I'm working at this pull-out table, if I have friends over. And then it has another use. This is actually how I get into bed. So I would transfer onto this bench and I'd push a button and the lid of the bench actually rises up to the height of the bed. The bed has to be really high because I've actually got a mountain bike under it. So there's no way I can manually lift my body weight up to the bed. It's almost shoulder height on me, so it was really important that I had some means to get into bed. Progressive Automations made the actuator, and it's just for basically a standing desk, but I've repurposed it for this bench, and so far it's been working really, really well. I know a few people have taken the idea and they've done it in their vans as well, so it's really neat to see when you can use something that's for another use and apply it to accessibility. The bed is actually fully adjustable for height. Each corner has an actuator, so the whole bed can rise up or down depending on what I have inside for equipment. This helps also when I'm packing things. I can just lift the bed up, and from the inside it can wheel right underneath and into the garage.
I do have one more video that I've taken that I can share of that bed actually moving.
That would be great.
Each corner is individually adjustable so that it can be leveled in any axis.
Yeah, so I'm very grateful that Kelly was able to come up with a solution, and I've actually been living in that van full time for 10 months, and it's amazing. Even just last week, I run a bike club, so I have 2 different bikes that I have, like one on a back rack and one inside, and I had one modified for quad controls, and we went to load it inside, and it wouldn't fit anymore because it had brakes on top. And the person at the bike shop was like, "Oh no, what do we do now? What do we do?" And I said, "Oh, no big deal. I just went, I got the remote and lifted it up and slid it right in." So just being able to have that versatility has been hugely impactful.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Lisa and Kelly, for joining us and discussing that project. I know Jean from Saskatoon has rave reviews of the project and of you, Kelly, as a volunteer. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the 2 projects or what you just saw? It definitely, it's always impactful for me when you've been around with Tetra for a long time, but you still see devices that you haven't seen before. And definitely I haven't seen that kind of customized bed. Kelly was saying she lived in that for months. So any other questions about those projects? Feel free to put them in the chat or just unmute and ask if you'd like.
If anybody is curious about the whole van setup, I do have a van tour up on YouTube. It's just packed with little accessible features too that, yeah, just make me able to live independently. So it's on Tiny Home Tours, their YouTube channel, and it was posted about a month ago. Or you can follow me on Instagram, keeping it wheel 306. And there's a link there.
Keeping it wheel 306.
Yeah, I'll add it in the chat here.
That would be awesome. And then you were saying, Lisa, you have a YouTube channel as well.
I don't really have the channel, but Tiny Home Tours has the channel and they've posted the video, but there is a link on my Instagram to that.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing with everybody. And I can imagine when they see you using it, it sparks what could be possible for other people. So thank you both, Lisa and Kelly, for kind of sharing your experience and your story and being so willing to share your videos.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we will continue on here. Now, I don't know if Marnie Smithies was able to join us. These last couple of projects were done in the Lower Mainland. And Jade, I know, isn't able to join us. She has a good reason. She's on her honeymoon. So with winter coming, and I'm sure everybody's scoffing, winter in Vancouver, what does that look like? Well, it's still cold, it's still wet. And so something that has grown as far as requests within our chapter in Vancouver is curling devices. And Marnie is one of the team leads. And the actual curling that they do is against able-bodied players. They are one of the only disabled curling teams. There are some that are more competitive. As some of you may know, curling is a full-on Paralympic sport. So when you come to Tetra, you can commercially buy the broom or the stick. In an adapted curling game, there is no sweeping. So you have to be the masters of shots. And Robin, our volunteer, who is holding the rock and helped design the holders. And you can see there's different types. Some, everything with Tetra, remember, it's tried to be customized for needs. So some of the holders are out front, some are a straight stick, some are more curved. So it can be designed to the chair. And I know Robin spoke about his joy was seeing able-bodied people completely get creamed by this so-called disabled team because they have mastered their shots, because again, there is no sweeping. So if you want to try accessible curling, Marnie mentioned there is different levels. You can have different teams. It's about coming out and having fun. And Tetra's there to help you so you can have a way to brace yourself for your balance, or a way to hold the curling stick, or when you're throwing and you want to keep your balance, as Kim is doing there down by the bottom of the screen wearing the toque, then you can stay upright in your chair, because of course maintaining your balance when you're making a curling shot makes all the difference. So that's another aspect of sport. And then on behalf of Jade, I'll speak about bocce. And again, bocce is quite competitive. And bocce is a sport that can be played by anyone with varying levels of ability. So in Tetra, sometimes you can see there's bocce shoots made. So those are for players whose challenges are more complex, but the player is still responsible for telling the assistant where to line up the shoot. And sometimes assistance is made in how to make the shoot, and Tetra volunteers can customize it so it can work with the chair. You can see the bend in the shoot. And then of course, if you were to play, it takes a long time to pick the balls up off the floor. And if you're practicing by yourself, so different customized ball holders have been made so you can do a round of the game without it being disrupted. And some of these Tetra devices have been taken to national competitions. And again, you can have a recreational game. You can grow with the sport. I myself am kind of a learn and try out. And when I played, it was a humbling experience. You think, oh, the balls are pretty light, you can just throw them around, but it is about aiming and technique. And there are some really excellent players all the way up to the Paralympic level. And then another game that Jade is really involved with is power soccer. This device was done recently. Wheelchair power soccer is very competitive, and you'll see why they have guards in front of the chair, so you can guide the ball and be as independent as possible out in the gym.
Oh, she has a head. I understand you play power soccer. Yeah, so she uses her head to. Yeah, you like it? Yes.
So, and there is a level of developing your skill set and angling. And as you can imagine, when the players get super competitive, they can smash into each other's chairs. And so the guards also serve as protecting your legs, etc. And any questions on those? All of those devices are available through our RFA form, which again can be filled out online, or you can have help with that. And I want to thank all of our speakers who shared their story. And it was, I know that I learned a lot. Sylvia, is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think they're really inspiring projects, and I'm so appreciative of everyone coming out today, both the clients and the volunteer, to speak on them. I think it's fantastic.
All right. Well, excellent. I know that was a lot to take in. So Josh, why don't we take a break and do a door prize? I know Josh has been trying to find so you can see the wheel turning when we're doing a draw. How's that going, Josh?
It's going well. Hi again, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen so we can all participate in it. Let me know once everyone can see. Okay, perfect. Here we're going to go with the first spin. And the winner is Warren. Would we like another spin in there?
Please go ahead.
Okay. And the next winner is Katrina.
This is as close to Wheel of Fortune as I'll ever get, Josh.
Do we want to spin one more time?
Why not?
Let's do it. And Graham.
Well, he doesn't count. He works for the foundation, so we're going to do a redraw.
Okay, sorry about that, Graham.
Yes.
Okay, we have Laura.
And Graham, just so you know, you do count, but just not for this draw. Everybody counts. Thanks, Josh. Can we just recap the winners?
Of course, it was Warren, Katrina, and Laura. And I will be typing that all in the chat as well.
Okay, and then do you have our 3 previous winners as well?
I do. That will also be included in the chat.
All right, perfect. So just scroll through the chat. I think Ron, I remember him winning one of the draws because he said, "Oh, we're off to a good start." Okay, well, I just wanted to make everybody aware of something called NetClay. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And we've done our prizes. So you heard me talk about earlier, kind of Tetra through the years, how have device needs changed? And certainly this is the 3rd year we've done a virtual conference, and connecting online is more important than ever. And NetClay is a device that was passionately created by volunteers in Ottawa. And it started at the Briere Hospital. I think Paul Marriage has joined us online, so if I'm incorrect in anything, feel free to correct me, Paul. But it was definitely, if you're dealing with challenges and in a hospital bed, how could you connect to a computer? And then it was talked about how could we design it so that it enabled other people to connect with the computer as well. Because depending on your level of ability, sometimes a standard mouse can be challenging to operate. So I'm going to play some video clips to give you an idea more about NetClay.
The joystick functions as a mouse, moving the cursor up, down, left, and right. Let's see this in action. When you move the joystick, the cursor moves. You can move it continuously in the direction you desire. You can pause briefly and tap the cursor to the desired location. When you let go, the NetClay hub will give a beep tone. This lets you know it is ready for another control function. Let's explore the next peripheral, a touch sensor. This touch sensor has been programmed to perform a mouse click. You activate it by pressing on it with one finger. When you let go, the sensor will be ready for the next input. You can activate a mouse click by touching the button briefly. Buttons and sensors can also be programmed to move the cursor.
So that gives you an idea on NetClay, and I'm going to go to our official website because what we want to do is, of course, keep Tetra affordable and the devices that we have. So these are meant to be social ventures. So this is available through tetragear.com because I want to express again the everyday Tetra devices are done by donation or at no cost. But sometimes our volunteers have received multiple device requests for certain devices. So we thought maybe a way to give back to Tetra or support Tetra is to have a social venture and sell these online. So one is the Tetra Gear lights, and those are LED lights so you can be seen in the dark. I know there's some members attending today that have the lights, and I really want to focus on NetClay because NetClay has recently been launched. So here is Kauser, and I want to single him out because he also is a technical advisor for NetClay. So if you're thinking of purchasing NetClay or wanted to know more, Kauser is the person on the other end of the email that could help answer any questions that you have. And on the website, you'll see what is NetClay. We have testimonials from other clients that have used it. And really, the goal is, you can see it here in the different kits. So it's a portable hub that you can plug in, and you can have different types of joysticks. Some are very similar to a power wheelchair. Again, my own hands, my right hand is much less mobile and my wrist doesn't turn all the way over. So I could benefit from bigger sensors, the touch sensors that were talked about in the videos, or it's also easier to use almost like a goalpost. You can see the red mouse adaptation in the kit. And then there's varying prices, and we will send it out to you. We will ask questions. You have a warranty for up to a year. And we're really trying to make it easier to use a computer, and this is far more affordable than other devices that are commercially available. So if you deal with arthritis or fatigue or struggle with fine motor skills, then maybe NetClay is an answer for you. Again, it's at tetragear.com. That's where you'll find information on the lights and on NetClay. And if you did have any questions, we do have a resource. We have a configuration tool. And it'll talk about setup and user's guide, kind of welcome to NetClay. We talked about Kauser, one of our models there on the website. He also is our tech person, so you can speak to him in real time. And then there is information on how to configure for those who are more technical. Now, don't worry, I would have trouble setting up a NetClay myself. So if you did order one, our Tetra volunteers have helped people set one up. If it can't be done, over the phone. But again, all of this is done through tetragear.com. I want to thank Jessica and David Ostro and everybody who helped get the website launched. So all of this is available on the website if you want to check it out. And if you did have any questions, don't hesitate to ask about that and about NetClay. I, of course, will be available, or you can put them in chat. But I do want to keep us close to on time, and we do have another guest speaker who is very kind to give of his time. I wanted to introduce Alex Carey, who is into video gaming. He's a consultant. He's going to share a presentation about his passion about video games and really hit home the point that video gaming isn't just gaming. It's a way to connect with friends and your passion. And like any other passion, like we've talked about today, whether it's travel, whether it's accessible sport, when everybody can have accessibility, when everybody can have access, then that's when truly people can be involved. So Alex, I think I saw you online. Are you able to show your own presentation, or would you like me to do so?
Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction. Yeah, I should be able to share here. Just make sure I do the right screen. Let's see if that's working.
It is. You are sharing.
Excellent.
All yours.
Full screen. There we go. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here and coming to the event today. There've been some really cool presentations thus far, and hopefully I can fit alongside some of the cool work people have been showing. There are some roofers working on my apartment today, which have just impeccable timing. So if you hear random clattering and banging, they're just wanting to be involved. So yeah, so here we go. This is my talk on video game accessibility. So first and foremost, a little bit about me. My name's Alex. I'm a game designer, an accessibility consultant, and a mutant cyborg. That last part might need a little bit of an explanation. So the mutant part comes from my disability being caused by a genetic mutation, and the cyborg part is I have a titanium rod fused to my spine to correct scoliosis. So in the most literal sense, I am a mutant cyborg. So at my day job, I work as a game designer, and on occasion, when I tell people that, I tend to get a blank stare or a follow-up question somewhere along the lines of, oh, so you write code? Not exactly. How I explain it is that if you think of making video games like baking a cake, a game designer writes the recipe. There are people that specialize in operating ovens. Those are like your programmers, and people that are masters of cake decorating. Those are your artists. And if you're writing a recipe, you should know at least the basics of how those things work, but you're not necessarily getting your hands dirty yourself. So in short, just a game designer creates the roadmap or the recipe for a game. A follow-up question to this very tortured metaphor and often inquiry by my caring mother is, does this make money? In short, yes. The video games industry makes frankly silly amounts of money. That isn't to say I personally am making a living wage because disabled, but just to say that there is a very large pie to try and get a slice of. Now, on occasion, I still come across people who have the misconception that video games are primarily guns and explosions. Don't get me wrong, there are a tremendous amount of games with guns and explosions, but there are also a mountain of cozy, charming experiences within the medium as well. Games like Stardew Valley, where you move into a town, renovate a small home, and plant and harvest crops. Or A Short Hike, where you play as a little bird person who goes on vacation on a small island. And as the name suggests, you go on a short hike. Or unpacking, where you experience the story of someone's life only through unboxing their possessions and organizing the items throughout their home. What's particularly interesting about the game Unpacking, for me personally, is it allowed me to experience something I hadn't done before. I'm not typically able to fiddle with where things go on shelves, and I found that experience incredibly cathartic. So, as we go about normalizing the ongoing pandemic, I thought it would be prudent to acknowledge the role that video games played in keeping people connected during its start. Playing a game like Animal Crossing, people were able to virtually visit each other, check in, and not feel so isolated. But here's the magical thing. Games have always connected people. So let me tell you a story. My first love was hockey. When I was a kid, all I wanted to do was play hockey with my friends. Unfortunately, skate attachments hadn't been invented for wheelchairs, so that wasn't something I was able to do. I wasn't able to play hockey with my friends, and I felt left out. I felt excluded. What I was able to do was play NHL 2003 for the original Xbox. I could have my friends over and I could play game after game after game with them. And that made me feel included. Through games, I felt included. Through games, it leveled the playing field and allowed me to be part of that group, to be included. And that experience has always stuck with me, that through games, I felt included. Now, despite video games being this medium that can be incredibly inclusive and empowering, sometimes they have frustrating barriers to play. For example, in my lived experience, I could be having a wonderful time in a game like Zelda Breath of the Wild, and then have my fun come to a screeching halt because the game wants to show off how cool motion controls are. So in this screenshot, you're supposed to tilt the controller around, and there's that little orange ball, and move it through the maze, which is really cool if you're able to do it, and not if you're not able to do it. So that's incredibly frustrating and sort of takes you out of that play experience. Now, something like motion controls isn't the only barrier someone can experience to playing games, but before I get into that, a little disclaimer. So, maps lie to you. So, just like the Mercator projection stretches out a globe to make Greenland look the same size of Africa, even though those two things are not true, in the same way, this next part is going to lie to you just a little bit. Accessibility is a complicated subject, and the following barely scratches the surface, but in the context of games, I still think the following is helpful. So not strictly true, but is helpful. So there are 6 categories where barriers can exist to gaming: low vision and blindness, color blindness, hard of hearing and deaf, strength and dexterity, cognitive, and emotional. So first up, low vision. So a barrier may be a player may be unable to differentiate between objects in a scene, and a solution is something like a high contrast option. And a game that does a particularly good job of this is a game like Eagle Island, where, as you can see in the screenshot, the background is darkened and the objects within the scene are outlined. So, interesting point. The ability to read 20-point font at 20 feet away is why it's referred to as 20/20 vision. And the term legally blind refers to 20/200 vision or worse. So you can't read 200 point font at 20 feet away. So there seems to be a common misconception sometimes where legally blind means you have zero vision, and that just isn't the case. Within this barrier area, text size also seems to be a frequent issue, with things like text scaling being incredibly important. So, blindness. Players are unable to see visual elements, and a solution are things like screen readers for menus and scanning or sonar systems within the game. So for those who might be unaware, a screen reader is a piece of software that allows digital text to be vocalized aloud. They're used all throughout different types of computing, and that is just as true within games. A game that does a truly amazing job at blind accessibility is The Last of Us Part 2, which has an audio feedback system where you're able to push a button and sort of a sonar wave comes out from the player and is able to alert them to where objects are within the scene. And it allows someone with zero vision to be able to play the full experience of the game independently. Next up is color blindness. So a player may be unable to differentiate between colors. There are, I believe, three broad general areas for color blindness: red, green, and blue blind, and they're on a scale. And those are referred to as protanopia, deuteranopia, and tritanopia. There's also the rare achromatopsia, where you see in pure black and white, and those, I believe, are to do with the different cones in your eyes being affected. So within games, a solution to this is to not rely solely on color as a means of player feedback. And there's a game called Hue, which makes great use of this principle, using symbols as well as colors within their design to help with this. So, next barrier area, hard of hearing and deafness. A barrier may be, players may be unable to hear auditory elements, and the solution, again, is using a variety of feedback channels to communicate to the player. So a game that does a great job of this is like Fortnite, where it has a sound visualizer where there's a ring around the player that shows where sounds are coming from and what type of sound is occurring, which is a really great way of being able to communicate that different type of feedback. There's also haptics, which is where the controller may rumble or shake as an additional layer of player feedback that I think designers of games can explore a lot more to be able to help with this. Hard of hearing and deafness also includes, if you have dialogue within your game, you need subtitles to make that truly accessible, which could be an entire talk on its own. So we're just going to gloss over that. And if you're interested, there's a great video on the website Game Maker's Toolkit, which I've linked below there, which talks about subtitles and how to implement them effectively. So, strength and dexterity barriers. So this barrier area is primarily where my lived experience lies. So a barrier is players may be unable to push all the buttons in a default configuration. And a solution to that is something like input remapping, where you're able to change what buttons make what commands within the game. And a game that does a great example of this is something like Fall Guys, where it has fully rebindable inputs, and you're able to swap them as you see fit. This barrier area also covers things like chronic fatigue. So yeah. Next up, we have cognitive barriers. So cognitive accessibility is very broad. It includes things like dyslexia, sensory overload, motion sickness, ADHD, neurodivergence, the autism spectrum, as well as photosensitivity or susceptibility to seizures. So a barrier to this may be something like a player may be unable to discern where to go or what to do. And a solution is prompts or waypoints directing the player. If you look in that screenshot there, there's a big chunky arrow. Absolutely lovely, once again, by The Last of Us Part 2. If you're interested in learning more about this, I highly recommend Stacy Jenkins' video on the subject. Once again, linked below. So, last up, we have emotional barriers. players may be unable, or players may experience themes or content that provoke strong emotional reactions to the point that where they are unable to continue playing. And a solution is to provide a heads up to players about content from the outset. A game that did a cool job of dealing with this is something like the game Grounded, where they have what they call an arachnophobia slider, where you're able to adjust the number of legs that potential spiders have. So they turn from something that may be overwhelming to a player to sort of these happy little blobs. Not sure how effective that is, but it was a cool attempt at making that more accessible to players. So, adding another ingredient to the game's accessibility stew, there is a disabled advocacy saying nothing about us without us. And I think that is just as true for games accessibility as other forms of accessibility. When a barrier to an experience may arise, I think the best way to fix it is to have people with lived experience in a barrier area offer feedback to the game developers directly. This helps ensure that the solution being crafted actually helps the people being affected and solves the true problem that may be obfuscated with the complexities of creating software. So this led me to found a company called Playability Consultancy. So Playability is made up of a diverse group of people with disabilities with lived experience in the various barrier areas that exist to playing games. We offer a service to game developers where we playtest and provide feedback on areas of the game that may be unnecessarily challenging or impossible to interact with. We have barrier experts with lived experience covering strength and dexterity, hard of hearing and deafness, blindness, low vision, color blindness, emotional, and cognitive barriers. Now, in addition to lived experience of barrier areas, there are also guidelines and documentation that exists for games accessibility. I like to call these resources the King Ghidorah of games accessibility. King Ghidorah being the 300 monster that first debuted in 1964 and fought Godzilla. If it was not abundantly clear by this point, I am a giant nerd. So, first are the games accessibility guidelines. So this is a website listing fundamental games accessibility, well, guidelines. This is great for dipping your toes in and understanding the basics. Next are the Able Gamers Accessible Player Experience. This is a list of 22 design patterns, and I can't stress this enough. It has pretty pictures, and it's very helpful. The one I've chosen to highlight here is the Flexible Controls pattern, and its basic idea is to offer multiple input methods, such as keyboard, as well as a mouse and a controller, inherently will create a more accessible design. I highly encourage anyone who's interested in this type of thing to check out Able Gamer's 2-day training course that they offer. I thought it was really interesting. So finally, there are the Xbox Accessibility Guidelines, or ZAGs, because everything in accessibility has to have a 3-letter acronym. So there are 23 ZAGs that they have, which offer in-depth, crunchy information. So you go, okay, cool, I have text in my game. How big exactly should it be to be visually accessible? The ZAGs got you. As well as things like exactly how much of a contrast ratio for various elements in your game. Really, really in-depth information is what the ZAGs provides. So now what's really awesome is it isn't just enthusiastic nerds like me working to move games accessibility forward. Xbox has done some really amazing work making hardware solutions like the Xbox Adaptive Controller, which is that thing. Essentially, the XAC, which is a device that allows people to plug in buttons and switches, which may be better suited to their needs rather than the use of a standard controller like this one. So each button on the standard controller has a corresponding 3.5 millimeter jack, the same kind that you have on your headphones, that you can then plug in. Then you can plug in an adaptive button or switch into, giving you an immense amount of customizability while still being able to interact within the game. If you think this is something, or you may know of someone who has something like a strength and dexterity barrier that they may face to gaming, researching the XAC as a piece of hardware to look into, I think, is a really good step. Xbox did some really amazing work making that bad boy. So, as the talk is beginning to wrap up, I wanted to highlight a couple more cool games that make great use of accessibility principles. First up are some games that make use of primarily auditory experiences. There is The Veil, where you play as a blind knight and have sword fights and adventuring while having no visuals on screen. The game uses directional sound that you have to react to, which makes a really unique, engaging experience. Then you have Blind Drive. This is a much more zany game where you're kidnapped and forced to drive a car blindfolded. The game uses binaural audio, where it shifts the sound from left to right in your headphones or speakers to communicate cars whizzing by you as you frantically try and dodge them. Finally, as I was doing the research for this talk, I stumbled across a game called Real Sound, which was an audio-only game made in Japan in 1997 for the Sega Saturn. I just thought that was really cool. So for all of you with your Sega Saturns, feel free to dust that off and give it a try. So there were also AAA games with great accessibility. AAA being the Hollywood level gaming experiences. There is Forza Horizon 5, which is an incredibly realistic driving game, which has American Sign Language and British Sign Language interpretation, interpretation for cinematics. And then I think I brought this up a few times, but The Last of Us Part 2, which is an incredibly cinematic post-apocalyptic story about loss and revenge, and it is absolutely chock full of accessibility features. It has amazing high contrast mode, slow motion aiming, and I think I've mentioned it a couple times, but it's completely playable from start to finish by a gamer with zero vision, which is a really amazing achievement by Naughty Dog, the developer. There's also a few games that make use of eye gaze technology, where a camera can track where you were looking on screen and move the character to match your eyes, making it so you don't have to use a controller at all. Examples like Hyperdot, where you dodge an onslaught of hazards to a rhythmic soundtrack. In contrast, a game like Before Your Eyes is a much more meditative game, where you explore the memories of a person's life, and you do this by looking around the scene, but when you blink, time shifts forward, giving you the lasting feeling that all things must come to an end. So, I wanted to wrap up by just reiterating how wonderful and empowering the medium of games can be. Games have the power to connect people, be it playing together on a couch or retelling an epic adventure you've had over a cup of coffee. All games have the power to bring forth these truly amazing moments, and I think that experience should be available to everyone. So I encourage everyone to go out and play more games. Awesome. Thank you so much. The slides for this talk will be up on my Twitter if you've seen something that may have piqued your interest and you would like to look into it more. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
much. Oh, there he is. Okay.
Thank you very much, Alex. That was great. I don't know if you're still there. I just wanted to ask if anybody does have any questions. We are getting positive feedback in the chat. Some people are sharing their own gaming experience. I just wanted to ask Alex, if you're still there, would you say that Xbox is has done the most as far as a major gaming brand for accessibility?
Yeah, in terms of the AAA publishers, Xbox has probably put in the most legwork, to use a very poor pun. For that, for sure, the Xbox adaptive controller in particular is a really amazing piece of hardware. Yeah, I would say PlayStation, like Sony, has also put in some really cool work and done some really cool stuff with the PlayStation 5. I think the only console that is kind of lagging behind a bit is Nintendo. They tend to lack a little bit in the accessibility and run into some problems within their core franchises. But yeah.
And just a last question, because that's why I stopped playing games, because I found it frustrating. All the buttons were on the weaker side of my body. So a lot of what you talked about as far as vision and being, is it just within the setting of the games, or do you have to especially download an app, or how does that work?
For sure. So a lot of games nowadays have some accessibility features baked right into the games. So if you open up their settings menu, there can be things to help. Depending on the type of barriers a person is facing, sometimes external assistive technology is part of that solution to be able to game. I think the thing that I think is most helpful right now is if you are a person or you know a person who you think would like to game, looking into that field and sort of going down that rabbit hole is that there is light at the end of that tunnel. If you think you might not be able to game, you probably can find solutions these days to be able to help get back into that.
And if people have questions, which I'm sure they will, post this presentation, can they reach out directly to you or your colleagues that you mentioned?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or send an email my way. You can find that again through my Twitter. I'm sure I have it linked in there somewhere. Always happy to talk to people and potentially point them in the direction of resources that may be helpful for them to be able to get back into exploring games.
Well, Alex, on behalf of Tetra, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience and your continued passion to make gaming as accessible as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Okay. Thanks again, Alex, and thanks to all of our speakers thus far. Again, I hope everybody else is enjoying it. We will keep putting your questions in the chat. We can collect those and help you connect with the speakers afterwards. And Alex has generously put in his Twitter as well. So let's do, for this part of the day, let's do a couple more door prizes. Josh, I'll turn it over to you. Let's do another. We've done 6 draws already, so let's do another 3 more to make it an even 9. How about that?
Sounds great. We'll do 3 more. Okay. Sandy.
And again, the winner of the draw, you get a Tim Hortons gift card. If you don't like donuts, they have sandwiches, coffee. Hopefully you find something.
Okay, and just a reminder, all the names will be put in the chat.
After this draw, can you group them all together and post them?
Of course.
So people can see that they won.
Okay, and the next one, let's see if we can get a drum roll. It is Lewis. Okay, and the final and third one. Lisa. Perfect.
How are you liking that, Sylvia? We were getting pretty fancy there at the end with the drum roll and the visuals.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
I say I'm a showman.
Thank you very much, Josh. And it's very fitting that you're on screen because you're actually our next presenter. So do you need a moment to collect yourself, or can I start with your intro? You're just on mute there.
I'm good to start.
Okay, so let me just give you a bit of an intro. So I've had the pleasure of working with Josh through YLI, but before coming to the Disability Foundation, he's a graduate from the University of Toronto. He has a double major in political science and disability studies. He is very proud of his work to support youth and to support disability awareness and activism, social rights. He's very passionate about equality and seeing everybody have an opportunity. And his work with the foundation through the Youth Leadership Initiative has really helped him connect with this passion and continue on this type of work. And I also want to say, just on a positive, Josh recently got engaged. So congratulations there as well. So happy times all around. And again, we've had the privilege of working together for close to a year. So I'll turn it over to you to tell us more about the Youth Leadership Initiative.
Sounds great. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Josh Laddie, and I'm a coordinator with the Youth Leadership Initiative. The Youth Leadership Initiative is a project that came out of the Disability Foundation, and it's a 3-tier or phase project where we'll be studying and addressing employment barriers for youth with disabilities. It's led by youth for youth, and we had partnership and training with Royal Roads University. The Youth Leadership Initiative, as I mentioned before, is composed of a 3-phase plan, 3-year plan, in which we do research data collection, the formation of an advisory committee, and finally, the creation of a nationwide database for youth with disability to use to help find equitable employment opportunities and other resources. So when starting this project, we want to look at the current statistics and literature available regarding youth with disabilities in relation to employment. We found that 33% of youth with severe disabilities were neither in school nor employed, while 15% of youth with disabilities were neither in school or employed. To collect the data, we decided to use randomized surveys and interview youth with disabilities, since the majority of the literature focused around employers and employee and companies. To narrow focus, we wanted to look at one factor, which would be attitudinal barriers. Attitudinal barriers would be something like levels of self-confidence, perception of discrimination, and performance expectation. For the demographic, we originally wanted to focus on recent graduates and university students, but decided to adjust the age range to include those from 17 to 29 to create a larger scope. Phase 1 of the project consisted of research, and the first was through a survey and a focus group. We received 450 responses for the survey from across Canada, and the focus groups were selected from these surveys randomly. So the survey trends showed that the main areas of concern for youth with disabilities when entering employment were surrounded confidence, accommodation, and disclosure of disability. Youth, so 54% of youth with disabilities identified that they need more time to complete work tasks and believe that disclosure and disclosing their disabilities to their employers impacted their ability to gain employment.
After the survey, we moved on to the focus groups to get a more in-depth understanding of the struggles faced by youth with disabilities. In the focus group, the participants mentioned they were more likely to, in the focus groups, the participants were more likely to mention their perception of discrimination. 51% of surveyed youth with, here we go. Participants were more likely to mention their perception of discrimination in the focus groups. Youth with visible disabilities are especially prone to being victims of discrimination and ableism, and participants remarked that disability disclosure often resulted in the changing of employers' attitudes and a greater perception of discrimination, equaling a lower likelihood of actually getting hired. The conclusions of the report showed that low confidence represented one of the key attitudinal barriers to employment. One's experience finding employment varied also based on what type of disability they had, whether invisible or visible, and whether or not they chose to disclose the disability to their employer. This led us to the question, what systemic barriers needed to be addressed in order to help youth with disabilities for the next phase of our project? That leads into phase 2, which is currently ongoing, the assembly and creation of a national advisory committee. The advisory committee is composed of those with either lived, practical, or work experience in the field of disability rights and advocacy. And the main goal was to oversee and guide the creation of a national database to use. Excuse me, of a national database to use. Currently in phase 2, we're in the outreach process and reaching out to professionals all across Canada's provinces and territories to make sure there's fair and equal representation in the committee. Once assembled, the committee's first meeting will review and go over the terms of reference, listing the responsibilities and expectations. For the next steps, we're going to be continuing with phase 2 until we reach phase 3. If you'd like to follow along with our progress, you can visit the disabilityfoundation.org/YLI. Additionally, if you'd like to help or get involved, you can share the YLI findings with the participants of your organization, share the advisory committee opportunity, and if you have any recommendations for someone who you think should join the advisory committee, you can reach out to us directly. And if there are any questions, we will have 5 minutes to discuss or so.
Josh, just so everybody knows, on your last slide there was another email. You're working with other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're part of the team. And again, in your bio, you've worked with people with disabilities before and are quite passionate about this work. Maybe talk about how this work has been different to others that you've done and what you've kind of learned throughout the process.
Mm-hmm. So this work is much more hands-on, which is nice. And as I said before, it's led by youth, and a lot of my colleagues and teammates have experience dealing with lived experience with disabilities, and also have professional experience working in that area. So I think we're taking a very well-rounded approach to this. And the fact that we're including a youth perspective with our outreach, I think is really helpful, and something that we noticed a lot of the different studies didn't do. They were more focused on the higher levels of employers and organizations compared to, or in contrast with, the youth perspective.
And when you talked about the advisory committee, kind of the second phase, are you still looking, just to clarify, are you still looking for members on that committee?
We're open to new candidates, yeah. There are some areas, provinces and territories that we're lacking. PEI, Newfoundland, and Nunavut are the top 3 off the top of my head. But again, if anyone is interested or thinks they know of good candidates, our team is always more than welcome to vet them and see whether or not they'd be a good fit.
Well, thank you very much for your help today and your continued work on this project. And if people wanted to know more about YLI, there's some videos on our YouTube channel as well, correct?
Yeah, we have an Instagram. You can visit our website directly through the disabilityfoundation.org. And there is a YouTube and Facebook group as well.
All right, well, many ways to reach out and learn not only more about Wildeye, but about the foundation as a whole. And again, thank you so much. Joss is still going. He's in full academic courses, and he took the day off his studies to come help with TetraCon today. So I give you the thumbs up, and thank you so much for that. Your help with the draws and letting everybody in is greatly appreciated. So thank you so much.
Of course, thank you, everyone.
Okay, well, this year's TetraCon, again, we wanted to do a little bit different format. So these are all of our formal presentations, and this is the formal part of TetraCon. We're slightly ahead of time. I did want to say thank you to everybody, but before I get into that, because it wasn't just me who put on the conference, so I just wanted to throw it out to my other colleagues. Sylvia, as we look back on the day, anything that you wanted to add as far as closing thoughts?
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that showed up. It is going to be the best TetraCon we've had so far in 3 years. So I thank everyone for participating, for asking questions. I want to say thank you also to the RCs that were here today, Crystal and Eric, and of course, Andrew. I had to fill in for him. He'll be joining us after lunch with our internal conference. And I just posted on the side there the website for Tetra. So we will be putting this recording out to the public, but if you want your own copy, you can contact Eric or myself. And just thank you to everybody. It was great.
And I did see in the chat, again, this will be on YouTube and I think streamed on Facebook. So again, this concludes the public part of it. If you are a coordinator or a volunteer, somebody actively involved with Tetra, we're going to have kind of an internal kind of get together just to see how everybody's doing out in the field, so we can continue to offer great projects. But I can't say enough that it takes so many people, volunteers giving of their time, and coordinators working extra time in our communications team. And it's plans for this happened in the spring, and we're very happy to do it virtually because everybody is welcome to join us. And we hope to one day meet up again in person and do something in person. And if we do that in your area, look for updates on that. And there was lots of information here today, so just remember to go to the website, tetrasociety.org. We do have a toll-free number as well. I should mention that. I'll actually put that up on the screen.
It's already there. I put it in the chat as well, Eric, but you go ahead.
So I'm just going to give you, just so everybody can see, our audience can see. Here it is written out here. In case you're wondering, Tetra, again, is part of the Disability Foundation. We have moved offices earlier this spring. We used to be on Carroll Street. Some of you might have been in the office in person. We have moved to Clark Drive. So I'm just sharing that. Our main line, 604-688-6464. Our toll free, which rings right on my phone, 1-877-688-8762. We still do have faxes, which health professionals send in RFAs that way all the time. We have a general Tetra email, which is also checked. And then again, our website, tetrasociety.org. Also look for us on Facebook. Sylvia and Jessica would tell me to get people to follow. So I just want to thank everybody. And it's hard to believe it's been 35 years for Tetra already, but I am really proud to have been a part of it for a good part of those 35 years. and I have certainly benefited in many ways, from devices for myself to being able to work with such a wonderful organization and volunteers. So again, on behalf of myself and Tetra, thanks everybody for attending. It is greatly appreciated, and keep your questions and requests coming in. And we'll now take a break before we do our internal part. Josh has put in the chat the winners, so hopefully you can see that. And the winners are will get a Tetra gift card. And as we go to break, I will put back on our Tetra 35 years slideshow. Thanks, everybody.
If you can hear me, but the slideshow isn't playing anymore, and we can see whoever's checking their email. We can see that. Perfect. There's the slideshow again.